Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone around the world. This is Mukwano Mukwano. I am your host, Colin. Very happy to be back. Sorry, it's been a while. But as you know, this channel is now affiliated with the Independent News Network, So I'm very excited to be a part of this growing network as I grow my channel to grow with this network. And I am very excited to have on my guest this evening, who is a brother to me and a very important person in my life. And excited to have him on he's gone through a lot and we just wanted to give him the opportunity to share a little more about him, what he's been up to, as well as talk about some topics that have been prevalent in our conversations, I think, over the last few months. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce activist, DJ, dad, um, as of recently owner of now 3 passports like me,
Yes.
DJ Joe Nice.
Yes, sir. How you doing,
It's
Colin? What's good, brother?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Yes,
It's
sir.
been a while, brother,
Been a
but I'm
long time.
glad that I'm able to return the favor of having you on my
Yeah,
show.
man. I appreciate that. And first of all, thanks for all the kind words and the verbal bouquets in your intro. I appreciate that. And everything you said about me, it's a mirror. So, I feel the same way about you. And yes, yeah, I'm now one of the select few. And it's crazy that we're both having this conversation now because you have 3 passports, I have 3 passports. And I think a lot of our connection comes from our similarities in our backgrounds
Yeah.
because a lot of people don't know how and I don't say this negatively how eerily similar our backgrounds are. We were both born in England. We both came to America at a relatively young age. You came, I think, when you were 11 or 12 years old. I came when I was basically a toddler. The one difference is you have one parent from Trinidad and one from Barbados. I have both of my parents from Trinidad. So
Right.
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But yeah, it's wonderful to be here on your channel and your space and in your place. And I'm looking forward to a robust conversation and hope everybody pays attention and watches and listens and hopefully takes something away from what we're going to talk about for however long we talk.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching, thank you. Appreciate. I know kind of competing with other people at the moment, but definitely appreciate you guys logging in. So Just JC, thank you for coming in. World Pilgrim, thank you for being here. And I'm sure others will kind of stream in later. Yeah, I am looking forward to what we're going to be talking about. So for those of you who are in America, who are getting ready for Thanksgiving, get your food prep on, get your drink, get your snack. We're going to be here for a minute. So yeah, the last time I think we connected was during the summer. I was on your channel
Yep.
and you've been through quite a bit since then. So do you want
Wow.
to kind of share with the community what you've been up to since
Yeah,
our
yeah.
last chat?
It's been madness. Yeah, this is the last. And in fact, the last time we saw each other was July 24th
Hmm.
at the Medicare for All March at, I forget what park it was, but it was in Washington, D.C.
Right.
That was the one park in the, where everybody was.
Yeah.
And that was the last time we chopped it up and hung out with each other in person, face to face. But yeah, that was July 24th. July 24th. My gosh. Yeah, lots happened since then. It's been a crazy time because a couple of weeks after that, actually, yeah, it was a week or so after that, I played a show in Denver at a venue called the Black Box. So that was August 2nd. Actually, no, it was August 2nd. Either August 2nd or August 3rd. Then later that week, I ended up going to Florida.
Hmm.
And then I hung out in Florida for about a week, maybe a week and a half. And then I played a show in Florida on August 13th in Miami. The next day, I flew from Miami to Seattle, Washington. And that's not close. And then
Right.
when I flew all the way out there, I started feeling terrible. In fact, I was feeling terrible kind of going into the Miami show, but I was like, you know what? I don't have symptoms that would lead me to believe that I have COVID. I just, just maybe felt a bit run down. Maybe it was the change in altitude, maybe it was the change in air pressure, whatever. Because when you go from Denver to somewhere else, it feels a little bit different. So, I didn't feel good for a couple of days when I was in Florida. And then when I flew out to the West Coast, I was useless. It was not only I just felt horrible. So then I said, you know what, let me just fly back home. So I flew back home on the 15th, on the next day, the 15th, and I began to isolate. The next day, that Monday, the 16th, I ended up going to my local healthcare clinic here in town, and I took a COVID test. They said 24 to 48 hours. And then they ran a bunch of other tests on me, and they were like, yeah, something's wrong with you. You're not feeling right. You're all over the place. Yeah, blood pressure was up. Body temperature was 102, 103 degrees, which is uncharacteristic for me because I'm one of the coolest people you might ever see in your life. So, I mean, how can my body temperature be 103 degrees in the summertime too at that? So next day, up to the 17th, I drove myself to the emergency room, University of North Carolina Hospital here in Chapel Hill. Got diagnosed with COVID. And then they took a look at me again, did some x-rays, and they said, yeah, your lungs are also filled with fluid. You have COVID pneumonia. And I was like, what? So then I'm like, okay, well, pneumonia is enough to kill you. COVID was taking people out left and right. So I'm at this point, I'm more than worried. I'm concerned. It's a thing now at this point. So
Mhm.
then, so I'm thinking, okay, they're going to send me upstairs, give me a hospital room, and I'm going to be here for a little bit. They tell me, nope, here's an inhaler, here's some cough medication, here's some pain medication. If you get worse, you can always come back. I'm like, well, what if I die? I mean, shit's not looking good right now. So then 3 days later, on the 20th, I drove back to the emergency room again because at this point I could barely breathe. And if you know where the hospital is, the emergency room, and there's a valet parking area right next to the emergency room. So I parked next to the kiosk at the valet parking area. So I got presidential parking. Walked into the emergency room with a little book bag, a couple of changes of clothes, a razor, and a toothbrush and some toothpaste. The lady at the triage area recognized me. She said, "Oh, Mr. Knights, you're back again." I said, "Yeah, I'm back again." I mean, I should have never left, quite honestly. So then they put me in the COVID room. And the COVID room is just a room that's isolated with a massive HEPA filter that's going, and it's
Mhm.
going and going and going, and it's loud. Colin, from the time I walked into that room until the time I was in room 6312 on the sixth floor with an IV of fluids, another IV of remdesivir, and getting shots of heparin to prevent blood clots, it was maybe 30 minutes. And I'm not even sure it was 30 minutes. It was probably much quicker than that. So they were running all sorts of tests on me and checking my blood and everything else. And the phlebotomist came in probably about 2 o'clock in the morning and took a bunch of blood out of me. He was like, "Hey, we need blood." I'm like, "Yo, how much blood do you need? You gonna leave some for me?" Jesus Christ. He just kept taking blood, blood, blood. So morning comes around, and the nurse is like, "Yeah, you might have life-threatening blood clots in your legs and in your lungs. We need to do a CT scan." I'm like, okay, damn. And here I am, still got oxygen tubes in my nose, fluid, remdesivir, and getting heparin shots in my guts to make sure I don't have blood clots. So they wheeled me down at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they did all the tests and everything. And they said, "Well, Joe, we're going to know in a couple of hours if you have blood clots in your legs or not, or in your lungs or not." And I said, "Okay." So they'll know in 2 hours. So the scan took about an hour. They wheeled me back upstairs, got back in my bed. It's now about quarter after 3. Colin, I'm telling you, that was the longest 2 hours of my life.
Right.
That 2 hours felt like 2 weeks. I'm like, yo, these cats had better hurry up. And there's an old adage, a watched pot never boils. So I'm watching the clock. Like, yo, come on now. Wait until 5 o'clock. So I got tired of watching the clock, and I don't watch TV, so I just fell asleep. So I'm out cold. I wake up at 6:30. I call, first thing I do is get that little phone call from the nurse. I'm like, "Yo, nurse, yo, what's going on?" And they're like, "Yeah, we still don't know yet. We still don't know yet." So I'm thinking, okay, at this point, probably not going to happen. I probably don't have blood clots in my legs. Then at that point, it's 6:30. Nurses are working 12-hour shifts, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So they switched over the crew. So I didn't get a nurse again till about maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30. New nurse comes in and was like, "Yeah, Joe, you're okay. You don't have blood clots." I'm like, "Okay, great. Thank God." So, but still, I'm still concerned, obviously, because everything else that's happening. So Sunday comes around. The nurse that I had the night before was like, "Hey, Joe, it might be time for you to think about going home." And I told her, like, "That sounds nice, but I'm not going anywhere yet. I mean, I'm not ready. I'm not mentally ready to be patient and caregiver. I mean, I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody that can help me do anything where I live. I live by myself, and the only reasonable support system I have is my ex-wife, and she's an ex-wife for a reason.
Right.
So, I can't be asking her to be like, "Yo, could you go grocery shopping for me? Could you pick up some detergent from Costco later this afternoon?" I mean, I can't really ask her to do all that stuff. So, I had to make some plans and have some contingencies in order. And then I was like, look, I'm not asking to stay here for another week, but I can't leave here now, and I can't leave here tonight. Let me get a late checkout. I'll check out tomorrow. So then after about 15 or 20 minutes of constant back and forth with the one nurse, she was like, okay, we'll let you stay until tomorrow. And I'm like, common sense would tell you that common sense would have said I should have been leaving the hospital today because I should have been admitted 3 days prior instead of being admitted 3 days later than I probably should have been, and then them trying to push me out after about 2.5 days. So I ended up going home on the 20th, on the 23rd. I ended up going home on the 23rd, and I drove home, and then I had home health care nurses come and visit. I ended up in isolation for, I think, 31 days because the COVID symptoms I had and the pneumonia was just not going anywhere. And my
Right.
tachycardia, which is an accelerated heart rate, it just wasn't decreasing at all. So, I mean, my resting heart rate before I had COVID was between 70 and 80 beats per minute. When I had COVID, especially when I had it at my worst and at home, it was consistently 115, 120 beats per minute. I'm using my pulse oximeter every 4 hours, writing down notes, look at my oxygen. It was rough. It was rough for a while. So then I took a COVID test at the Orange County Health Department, I think on the 14th or 15th of September. Got my first dose of the jab. Then the next day, I got my results back and I was COVID free. So at that point, I had officially recovered from COVID. I had 8 home health care visits from a doctor, from a home health care nurse. I also had 2 physical therapy appointments because my right shoulder was, and like the muscles in the back, rotator cuff and everything was all out of whack because of all the coughing I was doing. I mean, I was drinking a lot of water, going to the bath, peeing about 20 times a day. It was a mess. It was a total mess. And my hospital bill was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Would you mind sharing how
Yeah,
much?
there's no problem. The total cost of my hospital bills, the hospital stay, 3 days in the hospital was just over $25,000. All of the medical charges, the emergency room visits, everything else, my total hospital bill was $35,700 and change. It was just over $35,000. It was $35,000, and of that, $25,000 of it was me being in room 6312 in a hospital bed. So now, don't get me wrong, University of North Carolina is a great hospital, but I'll tell you right now, the care that I received was not worth $8,500 a day. I can
Right.
guarantee you that. I can
Right.
guarantee you that. I don't know what kind of pricing they had. I don't know if there was an exchange rate between the hospital and the US dollar. I don't know what was going on. But yeah, it was great care. They had wonderful nurses, doctors there. The phlebotomist was good, even though she took a ton of blood out of me. I'm still kind of questioning that situation. But yeah, hospital bill was 85. The hospital each day was $8,500. So I basically spent $8,500 to be in a hospital bed for 3 days. I multiplied that by 3. That was 25 grand. The the emergency room visits and everything else, it was just over $35,000 for COVID. And that's just hospital bills. That's not even all the other medication that I bought over the counter that's not part of the medical bills. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. And and then I guess we tie this in with my activism. I mean, obviously, we were both big proponents for Medicare for all, and having a single payer healthcare system or something that's considerably better than what's called the three-legged stool model of healthcare that we have in the United States right now. And it's an absolute joke that the United States healthcare system has been relegated to go away and die, go to hell, or GoFundMe. And naturally, the first two were not an option. So I had to do a GoFundMe. Some friends of mine in Canada set up a GoFundMe. We raised about $5,000 for my medical costs. And that $5,000 is already been gone and paid. And I still have another about $30,000 left. And while I was in Europe over the past month or so, I received a letter stating that they haven't finished reviewing my application because I needed to send self-employment form showing that I'm a self-employed individual. I sent them 6 months of bank statements.
Right.
I sent them a packet of like this thick, 6 months of bank statements on paper, printed everything out, wrote a 2-page letter explaining everything. They're like, "Oh, we need you to fill out this form." And I called them on it today. I'm like, "What do you need me to fill out this form for? I just sent you all 6 months of bank statements before all of this." So I got to do that. But yeah, that's my whole story. I lost something like 25 pounds on COVID. It was, my strength was just gone, gone. I mean, getting up out of bed and walking to the bathroom. And I live in a tiny studio apartment, so it's not as if my voice echoes in this place. It doesn't. So I mean, getting COVID was a mess. It truly, honestly was a mess. But I'm considerably better now. I don't have any symptoms. I don't have brain fog. I didn't have any memory loss. I didn't have any loss of taste or smell. My heart rate is back to normal. So yeah, knock on wood. I mean, there's no wood near me, but I'll knock
Right.
on it anyway when we're done chatting, just to be safe. But yeah, everything's cool, bro.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you were sharing with me um on Twitter DM back and forth,
Yep.
just during this whole thing. So,
Yeah.
but I just thought, like, and funny enough, I around the same time I was going through like I had my physical, there was some abnormalities that I had to follow up with.
Yep.
Um, so so like, and I remember tweeting at probably around the same time when you were going through all of this, like, because I had my physical, I had my bill come back, and it was like, I think something like close to $400. And I'm kind of like, this is something that I need. This is something that you tell me that I should have once a year
Right.
as preventative care.
Hmm.
And the idea that you're going to try and nickel and dime me. And the thing is, do I want to pay it? No, but I have the means to.
Of course.
So, but if I was lower income, if I was making less money, or God forbid, low income, there would have been no way I would have been able to find that. So the fact that, like, granted, like, you were in more serious in this case, but like you came out with basically a big of a bill as I currently have in student loans right now, like, I think is insane to me. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you
It's no problem. It's no
sharing
problem.
that, because I think, for me, yeah, I was just kind of like floored how much, and funny enough for me, like when through all of this, I was just kind of thinking, like, what's the bill going to be versus, because I thought it was going to be serious, like with whatever was going on. Like,
Right.
and then my first thought was, how much is this going to cost me versus what I need to do in order to get well, assuming the worst. So I think it's just kind of fucked up that you have to think about costs over your life, essentially, given the health system that we have.
Yeah. And the health system that we have forces people to make these sorts of cost benefit analyses with your life,
Hmm.
which should never be the case, because there shouldn't be every life has value, every life has a worth, but there shouldn't be a monetary value placed on that worth, on
Right.
that life. But our healthcare system forces individuals to make decisions where you either pay for your dialysis, or you pay your light bill.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there are times when some individuals out here can't do both. There are some individuals, it's and I know I've talked about the healthcare system a bunch on my YouTube channel, and a couple of several podcasts that I've done before in the past. And if you give me a chance, I want to go ahead and actually truly break down how the healthcare system in this United States
Yeah,
actually
go ahead.
works, because the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and bear in mind, Barack Obama, a Democrat, passed that healthcare law.
Hmm.
But the roots of that healthcare law did not come from the Democratic Party, not at all, not even the least. It actually came from not only the Republican Party, but a Republican think tank, a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation.
Right.
Now, the Heritage Foundation consulted Mitt Romney when Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts to draft a healthcare plan for the state of Massachusetts called MassCare,
Yeah.
otherwise pejoratively known as Romney Care.
Right.
And Romney Care worked on a state level because there's basically one payment system for medical bills on the state level in Massachusetts. And it was based on what's called a three-legged stool model of healthcare. The three legs of the stool are access to insurance, government subsidies, and a fancy rule called the individual mandate. The individual mandate essentially says that you, the private citizen, have to go at are forcing the government is forcing you to buy a privately owned product. And if you don't buy that privately owned product, we, the public, in this instance, the government, will assess a penalty to you for not buying health insurance.
Right.
Okay. So I want everybody to think about what I just said. You, private citizen, are forced to buy a privately owned product, health insurance. And bear in mind, health insurance is not actually a product. Health insurance doesn't do anything. It's just health insurance is a fee to pay for a service that you're already paying for. I know, mind-blowing, but that's what it is. Crazy, but true.
Right.
And then the other part of it, then if you don't buy this product that you're already paying for so you can get access to your product, we, the government, will assess a penalty to you for not buying that product. I have an Android phone. If the federal government told me, hey, Joe, you got to buy a phone. We don't care what kind of phone it is, but you got to buy a phone. Well, let me actually use a better example because you kind of need a phone now for the most part, but you don't really need a TV. So let me go with a TV example. Hey, Joe, you got to buy a TV. We don't care what kind of TV it is, whether it's a Samsung TV or a Sony. We don't care what kind it is. You just got to buy a TV. And if you don't buy a TV from one of these stores that sells TVs, whether it's a Best Buy or Costco or wherever, we, the government, in this instance, the Internal Revenue Service, will assess a $695 penalty for not buying a TV. Now, could you imagine what people would have done if that actually were to happen in the United States, where you forced everybody to buy a TV? People be like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't want a TV. I read books all the time. I don't want a TV. But because a TV is a tangible product, okay, you would have that argument. But nobody did any of that when healthcare came around back in, I think, in 2010 or 2011 when the Affordable Care Act was drafted, because healthcare is an intangible. Healthcare is an intangible. So the major difference between Romney Care and Obamacare is the amount of the individual mandate penalty. That's really the major difference. There are a couple of other things here and there, but for the purposes of not boring your entire audience with all the minutia, just that's the major difference. So when Trump came in and decided to pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, one of the major provisions which the Democrats voted for is to reduce the individual mandate penalty to $0. Now, in Trump's quote unquote infinite wisdom, he knew that he could never repeal and replace Obamacare because, again,
well, he tried.
He tried, but it was a waste of time and energy and money. Because in order to do that through the other two legs of the stool, it would be a whole lot of lawsuits, and he wasn't going to be in office long enough to see those lawsuits go to court. Just wouldn't make sense. So the quick and easy way to cripple the system, literally and figuratively, is to reduce the individual mandate penalty to $0. So what happened with that? When you reduce the individual mandate penalty to $0, you have fewer people that are forced to pay into the system. And the people that are most likely to not use health insurance are young, healthy people. So young, healthy people, based upon actuarial science, are least likely to use health insurance or a health insurance product. So what does that do for everybody else? The aggregate that is involved in the health insurance pool now have to pay more because the people who are not paying into the system, young, healthy people, aren't paying into the system. So there's now a smaller pool in the aggregate. So premiums have to increase simply on the basis of fewer people paying into the system. On top of that, people who are most likely to use health insurance, who are people who are older with chronic health conditions, now have to pay more than what they were already paying because they're the people who are most likely to use insurance, and they have fewer people that are sharing the risk.
Mhm.
And the people who were sharing the risk were young, healthy people, in addition to everybody else that was forced to buy health insurance. So what happened? So now health insurance companies realized that there are fewer people paying into the system. So what did health insurance companies do? They just turned up their rates. And then what they did on the backside of it is they increased premiums and they increased deductibles. So now you're paying more and getting less than what you were paying for.
Right.
So it's entirely possible for a family of four to have a $10,000 deductible. Okay, good. How many people do you know who have $10,000 to quote? Because a deductible is a form of self-insurance. So when you have a deductible, you're willing to say, insurance company, I'm willing to insure myself up to this particular amount, which is my deductible. You will cover everything over my deductible. So if you have a $10,000 deductible, and let's say you only had $6,500 of medical costs, you've paid all this money in premiums each month, thousands of dollars if you have a family, and then you have a $10,000 deductible. You then paid thousands of dollars of out of pocket expenses, and you still receive nothing from your insurance company, nothing at all. So this is what everything I just explained is exactly the healthcare system in a nutshell in the United States right now. And obviously health insurance is tied to your job. So when the pandemic began in the middle of March in 2020, it wasn't just individuals that lost their jobs, it was families that lost healthcare.
Right.
So if you have a family of five and let's say the breadwinner is the wife, and she makes 100 grand a year, and all of a sudden there's a husband and three kids that are also on that wife's health insurance. Wife loses her job. Five people just lost their health insurance.
Right.
Five, and that was a vastly under-discussed conversation or talking point during the early days of the pandemic, because so much of the pandemic was focused on death. It was, oh my gosh, we have these lockdowns. Is there going to be a stimulus package? Are the progressives going to use Section 1881A of the Social Security Act to give everybody a Medicare for all because of an emergency exposure to an airborne virus? What's going to happen? Nobody talked about how many individuals lost health insurance, because so many people were focused on how many people lost their jobs. But not many people discussed, or at least did the mental math between job loss, health insurance, aggregate number of people that now lost health insurance. Nobody really discussed that. And it's something that people are still dealing with to this day, because there's loads of people who have still not been able to return to their jobs or have had to find new sources of employment. And these new employers may not necessarily have the financial wherewithal to provide employer-sponsored health insurance. So now you have to go into the health insurance, your state exchange, to get health insurance at this point. And good luck doing that. And if you're on a bronze plan, and depending upon your age and your health, etc., your bronze plan might be $450 or $500 a month, and you're not getting any coverage. You're paying incredibly high deductibles. You have co-pays that are hundreds of dollars each time you have to go visit a doctor or any type of medical professional. What's the point of having health insurance at this point? You're better off being extremely poor, or the actual term is the indigent. You're better off being indigent and hopefully living in a state where you could qualify for Medicaid through
Right.
the Medicaid expansion. And where I live in North Carolina is one of the states that did not accept the Medicaid expansion. Where I used to live in Maryland did accept the Medicaid expansion. So with the Medicaid expansion, what the Medicaid expansion is a bunch of money that was given to the states in the form of what's called a block grant. And the block grant, the federal government gave money to states, and the government paid 90 cents for every dollar for any medical costs. All the state had to do was kick up the final 10%, or final 10 cents on the dollar. And these grants were hundreds, $800, $900 million or so given to each state. So what most states, in fact, what every state did, what they did is they expanded the maximum salary allowed under maximum salary allowed to still qualify for Medicare. To still qualify for, actually, let me rephrase that, still qualify for Medicaid. So in a state like where I live in North Carolina, the maximum salary that you can have and still qualify for Medicaid is about $8,400 or $8,500. It's not much money. In states that expanded Medicaid, that number jumps up to about 13 and a half or $14,000. I'm probably off by a few $100, but that's kind of where it is. But here's the problem with that. In every state in the United States has this phenomenon. It's called the coverage gap. And the coverage gap happens when you don't make enough money to qualify for the Obamacare premium subsidies, but it's the gap in between. You make too much on Medicaid, but you don't make enough to qualify for the government subsidies under Obamacare. So in a state like mine in North Carolina, that coverage gap is about $8,000. In Maryland, it's about $1,200. So if you're working at the airport, you're a baggage handler, and you make $13,000 a year, and you don't have employer sponsored health insurance, you don't make enough. Or let's say you make $14,000, and the cutoff point is $15,000 to start qualifying for Obamacare. But let's say you make the limit, the most you can make and still qualify for Medicaid is $13,500. Let's say you make $14,000. You're screwed because you make too much to still qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to qualify for the Obamacare premium subsidies.
Right.
So now if you're making $14,000 a year and you don't have an employer-based healthcare plan at your job, you're not buying health insurance. With what money? What money do you have to pay for health insurance?
Right.
Where are you getting that from? Where are you getting that from? So this is why I know you're involved with Medicare for All. I just had a conversation with I just had a conversation last night with some of the people from the Medicare for All organization, because I haven't really been involved since I got sick and everything.
Right.
But I'm now going to be a member of their advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start doing that again. I know I couldn't do the meetings every Sunday because I'm traveling a lot again.
Right.
Again, in the past 35 days, I've been to 9 countries. So
Right.
I'm back on the road again, and I'm moving a lot. But in an advisory role, sure, because I know they're going to start to do some different things with regards to their organizational structure, and I have a little bit of expertise in that sort of thing. So
let me ask you then,
yes, sir.
in your opinion, what do you think is the best action, I think, for us on the ground to take? Because obviously, like we're still in the thick of the pandemic, I would say.
We're still in a public health emergency, by the way.
Right. And for me, I just kind of think in terms of like, people like Jimmy Dore, I'm using it as an example, who's had long haul symptoms
Mm-hmm.
for COVID, just getting the shot, and then I know others who have had residual, residual issues, from having COVID.
Right.
And there's still a lot about COVID that we don't know about yet.
A ton.
That down the road, like years from now, that, if something pops up, they have to go to the doctor, who's going to flip the bill? Like, it's not the government, it's us. So I don't think people necessarily think in those terms, like long term. I think people are just kind of trying to get through, let me just get the shot or the boost or whatever, and then just kind of move on with my life.
Exactly.
Without thinking like the possibility of what something happens to me in relation to, COVID, or even the shot that we still don't know about that I'm going to need future care for. So what do you think, what would you say to the community? Like, what should we do now? And I know that's a big question, but what do you feel like the best steps that we should be taking now? And it doesn't have to be big, but as far as I think bringing awareness more, you know, I think just as far as universal healthcare is still a thing, we still need it.
Hmm.
And yeah, we have a Democratic president, but they're obviously not doing anything. And I would make the argument, like people were more fervent for universal healthcare under Trump, you know, but um, so moving forward, what do you feel like, or what do you think we should be doing?
There's a couple of things I think we should be doing. The first thing is something that the Medicare for All organization has discussed is to file a human rights complaint based upon Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights against the United States with the United Nations. I'm not sure how much teeth that actually has. It might just be something esoteric or symbolic, but it's noteworthy
Hmm.
because it further reinforces the point that healthcare is a human right. In fact, in that article, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it actually doesn't say healthcare, it says medical care. But be that as it may, it's something that I think people should pay more attention to. Because if there's 25 or 30 activists in front of the United Nations headquarters in New York City saying, don't drop the ball, Medicare for all, we need healthcare now, universal healthcare now, or some form of single payer government sponsored healthcare. And it can be universal health care, it could be government subsidized health care, it could be a single payer healthcare model, Medicare for all, whatever it is. As long as there is something for everybody. So when you were born in these United States, you get healthcare from day one. There's not, oh, well, you're 26, you can go to your mom's. None of that. You get it immediately.
Hmm.
That's, I think, something that would certainly raise more awareness because I don't think when people say, oh, healthcare is a human right, they don't understand where that comes from or why that is. So that's, I think, the first thing. That's, I think, the first thing. So we have one key that unlocks that door. That key is to raise awareness. And what better way to raise awareness than in New York City, across the street, or in front of the United Nations with a bunch of banners and signs raising hell saying, we don't drop the ball, Medicare for all. Everybody in, no more be out. That's what healthcare is all about. We get it going, just like we did on January 2nd and January 3rd and January 4th or actually 3rd, 4th, and 5th at the Force the Vote rallies in Washington D.C., which is
Hmm.
actually where we met.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I think we need to do, and this needs to be a nationwide collective action situation, is to have mass worker strikes. And this is something that I've long been a proponent of. Shut everything down until the people that we have as our representatives listen to us instead of the 1% or their wealthy donors. They need to listen to us. They work at our pleasure. Our politicians are supposed to work for us, and we need to remind them of that. So if they don't work for us, we should not be working for anybody. We should
Right.
shut everything down. Mass worker strikes across this country, intra-industry and inter-industry. Shut everything down. Our politicians are supposed to be working for us. They are public servants. They are public servants. And I think all 538 members of Congress need a reminder about this. They are public servants. They work at our behest. They work at our pleasure. We should shut everything down until they listen to us, because we've tried to do it. We've tried to have them listen to us by exercising either our 15th, 19th, 23rd, or 26th Amendment rights. These are all the four amendments that a Constitution allows that affords voting rights to people.
Hmm.
So we've tried to do that, and we tried to exercise. We tried our voicing our pleasure or displeasure, support or dissidence at the ballot box. None of that has worked. Desperate times, which we are in right now, call for desperate measures. And the next desperate measure that we must take are mass worker strikes across this country. Shut everything down. And if if a 250 million people in India can shut it down,
Yeah.
and then have a coalition of civil servants join in. And this originally started with farmers, and then
Hmm.
civil servants joined in, and other people joined in. Okay, there's no reason why UPS drivers can't just walk off the job. UPS drivers, you know what can Brown do for you? Well, Brown's not doing anything right now because everybody doesn't have health care,
Right.
right? Could you imagine if a bunch of butchers at your local grocery stores. Just say, yeah, we're not slicing deli meat today. Nah, we're not coming back. We're not coming back until everybody gets health care. Until we force the politicians to do what we want us to do, what we demand of them to do, because they are supposed to be afraid of us. They're supposed to be scared of us. We are the people who hold the power, not them. They work at our pleasure. Get it done. Get it done. That's it. Could you imagine if all the HVAC workers in Arizona and New Mexico in the summertime said, you know what? This whole air conditioning thing, it's overrated. We're not going to give everybody air conditioning. We're not fixing your shit. Sorry, we're not fixing this. Not until these politicians do what we're supposed to be doing. We've tried voting our preferences and our wishes and our desires for basic human rights. And our government cannot even afford to give us our basic human rights of clothing, shelter, food, and health care, or in this instance, medical care based upon Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. If they're not willing to do that, then why should we do anything? Why are we paying taxes? Something else that I think we should be doing right now is, and there's a book that I read, the author is a lady by the name of Astra Taylor, and the name of the book is called Can't Pay, Won't Pay. And it talks about using debt as a form of activism and a form of collective action. Mm-hmm. And what I think America needs to do is to take a look at our collective debt that we have right now and weaponize that debt. Weaponize that debt. Because much of the debt that we owe to our creditors, it's fake money. It's fake debt. Take a look at your student loans. And this is something that you mentioned. You said that your student loans are about as big as my medical bills. My student loans right now are probably 5 times as big as my medical bills. For the listeners, I have 2 master's degrees, one from the University of Baltimore in nonprofit management, the second from Wake Forest University in intercultural services and healthcare. I have 2 master's degrees. My student loans right now, I think, are $178,000. Yeah, I know. I know. $178,000. I don't have a law degree. I'm not practicing medicine. And I've had exactly 1 job interview in the past 11 months. Go figure. So that student loan is not getting paid back. I can tell you that right now. That's not getting paid back. And if the government tries to garnish my wages or do some sort of shit, okay, bye. Shit, I'm like you, brother. I got 3 citizenships. I got 3 passports. I'll leave this country behind it with the quickness. On peace. Bye. I can go live somewhere else. So, and again, this just shows to show how insidious the Democratic Party is, because the Democratic Party said, wait, we're going to student loan abolition. We're going to get rid of student loan debt. We're going to forgive all your student loans. No one's even talking about that now. These are the same people that said $15 an hour as a minimum wage. $15 an hour. And you see the inconsistency of their arguments, because when everybody was getting $600 a week, including me, during the CARES Act, if you break down $600 a week by a 40-hour work week, that's $15 an hour. Right. So again, they were giving away $600 a week to everybody in the beginning of this pandemic during the CARES Act, but somehow $15 an hour and giving that to everybody is this far radical foreign concept. Well, wait a minute. You gave everybody $600 a week. If you divide that by 40, that's $15. But now in the latest stimulus package, which some states tried to end 2 months early, and nobody is talking about a stimulus package now because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We're still in it. Okay. The current Health and Human Secretary, I think it's Javier Becerra. I think that's who it is. Javier Becerra has not rescinded that order from the previous Health and Human Secretary under Trump, Alex Azar. And we've been in a public health emergency since January, either 27th or 29th of 2020. We've been in a public health emergency. Next, we're coming up on almost 2 years of being in a public health emergency. And there's still millions of people who are uninsured, millions more who are uninsured, millions more who remain unemployed, and the government has done nothing to help people. Yet they've given trillions of dollars to the biggest banks in America and around the world. And then with this latest Build Back Better business, which is bullshit. And that's a lot of B's in one sentence. And I'd like to thank my phonics teacher for teaching me alliteration. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Where's any of these social programs that are designed to help people? Where's the family leave? Where's the health care? Where's the $15 minimum wage, which is woefully inadequate? $15 was what people were talking about when the fight for 15 was initially implemented about 10 to 12 or 15 years ago. The minimum wage in this country right now, based upon worker productivity and other economic indicators, should be above $25 an hour, probably approaching close to 30. That should be the minimum wage in this country. There should be people at your local Chick-fil-A or your local Chipotle making burritos and tacos for $27 an hour. Could you imagine how many people would be happy to work at Chipotle if they had health care and were making $27 an hour?
Right.
Could you imagine what would happen if you're a local gas store? Yeah, hey, you're making $28 an hour and you got health care covered by the government. Sure. Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. But again, this country, this is when, and again, we've heard this before by various podcasters, and I understand it because I've had to study it. This is a failed state. The United States is a failed state. The United States can barely does not cover all of the benefits and services that need to be covered for everybody. So we have some sort of basic human services and basic life expectancies and basic services and needs and wants and desires. None of that is being covered by the government right now. Something else that I think we should take a serious look into, a serious conversation, is not paying taxes. For what? What are we paying taxes for? To fund the military? 52 cents of every single dollar based upon gross domestic product goes to the Pentagon. And what does the Pentagon do? Consistently bomb brown and black people and other indigenous people of color around the world. For what? For what? What about putting that money into infrastructure projects? What about putting that money into human service projects that are designed to help people and not bomb other people who are not Americans? What about that? But no, the government just has their own ideas of how they want to do things. I'm telling you, the not paying our taxes is something that I would love to see a bigger conversation about.
Right.
And I know this is this is a serious this is a controversial topic. Oh, hey, wait a minute. There's two black people talking about not paying taxes. Wait a minute. Hold on now. And wait a minute. These two black people have citizenship in multiple countries. Hold on a minute. So look, if the FBI wants to listen to my conversations, all right, cool. That's fine. You can listen in, hear what you want to hear, see what you want to see. But I've got ideas and I'm going to talk about them because it's time that we need to do more than just talk about stuff. We need to have action, direct action, nonviolent direct action. And the types of nonviolent direct action that I think we've seen from people like Extinction Rebellion, that we've seen to a certain extent from the Yellow Vest protests and the Black Vest protests in France, the Gilets jaunes and the Gilets noirs. It's the type of protest that we've seen with the Red Berets in not only in Washington, but in Tunisia. We've seen these sort of situations happen. We've seen these sorts of uprisings with the indigenous people in Bolivia and Peru and Chile. So it's these kind of protests that we need to have moving. You know, Bob Marley said this years ago on the Exodus album. He said, Exodus, movement of Jah people, but not just Jah people in terms of God's people, but all people. We need to have a movement, and it needs to be more than just a movement of minds and movement. It needs to be movement of bodies. We need boots. That's why you always hear the chants, boots, boots, boots are on the ground. We're here to shut the shit down. That's what we're talking about. We need boots on the ground, people, feet in the street. It's serious out here. You can't just have a protest every once in a while when some black person gets shot and killed by racist white cops, but then all of a sudden 2 or 3 weeks later, everything's back to quote unquote reasonably normal. No, this has to be sustained, nonviolent, direct action. That's what we need out here. And if we need to somehow figure out a way to crowdfund these types of activities, then so be it, because something needs to be done here. We are in desperate times. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
So I think let's segue into this. And unfortunately, I don't want to necessarily talk about this, but
go for it.
let's talk about Kyle Winehouse.
Yep.
So, and I wasn't going to talk to you about this, but you said you wanted to share. You
Yeah.
had some thoughts regarding the whole case.
Mhm.
So, and I spoke to you before we went live.
Yeah.
Obviously for me, I'm kind of speaking, I admit my bias, being, and this is where my non-Americanness comes in.
Yeah.
As
Same,
far as,
same for me.
yeah, like and shout out to people like Leaf Greenland, like over the past week, who have been able to talk to me and kind of share more, just him being from the South, being able to share more about gun culture, which is something
Yes.
I'm totally like not, not a part of my world at all. So he and others have been able for me to give me some perspective that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about in regards to this case. But as a Black man who has seen like the fallout online in particular last week,
Hmm.
um, I understand the hurt. I feel the hurt. I'm numb to it, as like I'm sure you are too. But for me, and it has bothered me all week, and I was just trying to figure out, why is this issue bothering me regarding, because at the end of the day, Calvin House is just a dime a dozen. Like,
Well
there's
said.
plenty of kids like him. There's plenty of people like him who
Well
would have
said.
done the same thing. And how many of those people, like, the only difference is Kyle just happened to get, a platform, just as far as the media. That's really the only difference
Sure.
to me. So
Mhm.
for me, I just felt like it was bigger. Like, I saw a lot of people kind of being like, you can flip it, as far as Kyle represents the larger issue, which I believe is true. But I think, also at the same time, I do think like the establishment is also making this a bigger deal, as big of a deal too. I think both are true. So
Mhm.
you share a little bit with me
Yeah.
what you're thinking. Care
Yeah.
to elaborate a little bit
Of
more in
course.
terms of your thoughts and how this relates to, I think, the larger issue as far as I think this country in general, in terms
Yeah.
of, like, we do have a gun culture,
Sure do.
but I think, and I don't necessarily want to say I think we beat this over the head, but there's a lot there is issues connected to white supremacy, which I can't necessarily associates with this case in particular,
I agree with that.
but um I feel like a lot of people, especially people of color, are hurting because there's still a lot of unresolved issues in
Yeah.
relation to George Floyd,
Hmm.
where, and we'll bring this up in connection to another topic later,
Right.
where that was one of the rare times, I think, in our history where it wasn't just this country that I think generally had the buy-in, as far as everyone saw the tape and most people can kind of conclude this was wrong.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
world watched and said, this is wrong.
Yep.
And my frustration then, and continues to be, how I think as a community, the Black community in this country in particular, did not mobilize well enough, if
Perfect.
at all,
Thoroughly
to
agree.
use that as leverage in terms of, like, our presidential campaigns last year where I went to the protests and I saw many Black activists say on the street, we needed to vote for Biden. You know, so for me, it was just kind of like, you're telling our people to vote for the person that in a lot of ways, not in a lot of ways, has in part created the system that we're in and expect him to change it for the better.
Oh my God, Colin, you know what? That was my biggest frustration with last year's election
Hmm.
was that it was the the bourgeoisie Black class telling the non-bourgeoisie Black people to vote for Biden. It was the Jim Clyburns, Kamala Harris's, and Jamal Bowman's of the world telling other Black people like you and me, educated Black folk that can see through the bullshit, to vote for Joe Biden. And and I and again, I want people to understand how, if you, and I talked about this on my Instagram feed the other day, and I have these Instagram rants that I go on my Instagram stories every once in a while at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because my sleep has always been weird historically. I'm a terrible sleeper. You can ask any of my ex-girlfriends, you can even ask my ex-wife, she'll tell you this. But I wake up in the middle of the night and I just start to think. And I just go on it. But I want people to, and again, in one of the videos that I was involved in with at the Andrew Brown Jr. protests, and again, we'll tie this on with Kyle Rittenhouse. The reason why police have the, and I don't want to use this word flippantly or disrespectfully, but I'm using it in this context the way I feel it should be used. A stranglehold on the public is single-handedly because of Joe Biden. You're probably like, well, Joe, come on, man. You can't be blaming everything on Joe Biden. Fuck yeah, I'm going to blame it on Joe Biden. Here's why. In 1984, during the Reagan administration, and some of you all who are watching right now were not alive during Ronald Reagan. I was the ripe old age. He got elected in 1980. I was 4 years old. He left office in 1988. I was 12. All right. So in 1984, Joe Biden wrote the Comprehensive Asset Forfeiture Act in 1984. That gave every police officers the right to have civil asset forfeiture. What is civil asset forfeiture? Civil asset forfeiture is if the police think that you are suspected of committing a crime, or anything involved in your home or anything is involved in the commission of a crime, even though the police don't have any evidence of you being involved in that crime, the police can come in, knock on your door, and take your property, whatever that is, and you can't get it back. That is civil asset forfeiture, which is a complete violation of search and seizure, and the search and seizure laws, which I think comes under the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so Joe Biden did that. A few years later, he wrote the Anti-Drug Act of 1986. Anti-Drug Act is the first piece of legislation to institute mandatory minimum sentencing. Anti-Drug Act. Following year, he wrote and sponsored the Sentencing Act of 1987. You can look this up. It's all there. What did the Sentencing Act do? The Sentencing Act created what's called the United States Sentencing Commission. Essentially, that act took away the power of federal judges to adjudicate cases on their own merits and in context. So essentially, you had a rubric or a scorecard or a menu of charges and penalties for the charges. So if you had a heroin possession, first offense, 5 years. And because we have mandatory minimum sentencing because of the Anti-Drug Act of 1986, which Joe Biden wrote, you're going to jail for 5 years, but you might have an opportunity to get out on parole. What happened the following year? 1988, Anti-Drug Act of 1988. What did that do? It was more than just being recognized as the crack bill. What the 1988 Anti-Drug Act did, it also eliminated parole for federal drug crimes. So let's go back. If you got a 5-year heroin possession, guess what? You did every day of that 5 years.
Right.
And again, Joe Biden wrote that bill. He wrote it. Also, the 1988 Anti-Drug Act, otherwise known as the crack bill, reinstituted the federal death penalty. Okay? This is all Joe Biden now. All of this is Biden. Fast forward to 1994. 1994, Joe Biden writes the Omnibus Crime Bill. which everybody called the Clinton crime bill. If you watch the documentary 13th, but actually Joe Biden wrote that bill.
Right.
He wrote it forwards, backwards, sideways.
Biden's law.
It's called the Biden crime bill.
Right.
Called the Biden crime bill. And the Biden crime bill gave billions of dollars to place military grade weaponry in local, state, and federal polices. It instituted 3 strikes you're out. It paved the way for the private prison industry. This is all stuff Joe Biden did.
Right.
The following year, Joe Biden writes the
Well, not to mention that he added like financial incentive for states to do it.
Yes.
Implement it.
Yes.
So,
yes, there was that. There absolutely was that. The Joe Biden wrote the the crime bill. There's one other thing, the crime bill. It also criminalized non-payment of child support. That's in the 94 crime bill. 1995, Joe Biden writes the Counterterrorism Act of 1995. Bill never gets passed. 6 years later, September 11th happens. Okay, September 11th, right after that, the Patriot Act, which is a bill that Joe Biden had a major hand in writing. But the Counterterrorism Act of 1995, Joe Biden wrote and sponsored that bill also. You can look this up. It's on the internet. It's available. On congress.gov, just type in Counterterrorism Act of 1995. You'll see Joseph R. Biden Jr., Senator, Delaware, Republican, Democrat. It's all there. So he had a big hand in writing the Patriot Act. What did the Patriot Act do? Paved the way for mass surveillance in the United States, and it created a massive government restructuring. So when you and I were getting our citizenship papers in the United States, we went through Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS. Right. INS was kind of it for anything involving people from out of the country. INS got dissolved. And now you went from you had to justify the billions of dollars that were spent on putting 100,000 more police officers in the streets. How did you do that? You increased border security by having Customs and Border Protection. You kicked a whole bunch of people out of the country that didn't have any let's say working papers, by creating ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. You dramatically ramp up airport security by having the Transportation Safety Administration, and then you create an entirely new government agency called the Department of Homeland Security. All of that came out of the Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act's older brother, let's just say it that way, is the Counterterrorism Act of 1995. Joe Biden wrote that bill. A couple of years after that, Joe Biden wrote the RAVE Act, which involved ecstasy and other illicit drugs being involved at live music venues, where there's a C-SPAN hearing where he said, where if there's illegal drugs at a music event or a live music event, arrest the promoter. It's out there. It's out there. RAVE Act didn't get passed. 6 months later, he wrote and sponsored the Illicit Drug Act of 2003, if I'm not mistaken. The text from that act became part of another act called the PROTECT Act. The PROTECT Act became law. Joe Biden was a major architect of NAFTA, which destroyed labor unions, took a bunch of good middle-class jobs and sent them out to other parts of the world. So that's why you can buy a pair of socks made in Vietnam or Bangladesh for $3, and the people who make the socks aren't being paid any sort of benefits or any sort of livable wages. So Joe Biden sat shotgun for everything that Obama did for 8 years, and now you're seeing all the bullshit that Biden's doing now. But again, all of this goes back. I want to tie this back to not only George Floyd, but Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay, because remember, police have unmitigated power to do basically whatever they want to anybody at this point. Do we understand why the world knows who Kyle Rittenhouse is? The world knows who Kyle Rittenhouse is because Officer Rustin Shesky of the Kenosha, Wisconsin Police Department shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. An unarmed black man who did not commit a crime, but his only crime was being black and not complying with a white police officer's orders and instructions. Okay? When Jacob Blake got shot 7 times in the back and immediately became a triplegic, and I know triplegic is a fancy word for someone who doesn't have use of 3 of their 4 limbs. With the other limb that he was able to use, they handcuffed that to the bed because he had an arrest warrant. So this is a man who had permanent damage to his, can't use his legs and one of his arms, permanent damage to his intestines, damage to his stomach, he had damage to the arm that he could use, and they handcuffed him to the bed. Okay? There's a reason why these protests where Kyle Rittenhouse said he was protecting property, and there's evidence to potentially support this theory because of a couple of other videos that I've been watching. Okay, but if Kyle Rittenhouse were protecting property, okay, instead of, and then he said he's a medic and he was helping people. Okay, there might be some merits to that also, but none of this would have happened. None of this would have happened if Officer Rustin Shesky didn't shoot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. If
Right.
Jacob Blake doesn't get shot in the back 7 times, we don't know who Jacob Blake is. We don't know who Rustin Shesky is, and we don't know who Kyle Rittenhouse is. So for all of the conversation and all of the, and again, I want people to understand this. The people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot, they were all white people. But
Right.
somehow the mainstream media turned this into, oh, hey, Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist. How many white supremacists do you know that shoot other white people?
Right.
Really? Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But the last time I checked, white supremacists don't often shoot other white people. White supremacists typically shoot, I don't know, people who aren't white. So, and don't get me wrong, Colin, I don't mind saying this on your airwaves. Yes, there's a lot of things in this country that are about race. There are about race, and I understand that. But this Kyle Rittenhouse situation, it got conflated into a race situation because Kyle Rittenhouse got a gun and shot people, but then they compared that with Tamir Rice having a toy gun and police shooting him. The police didn't shoot at Kyle Rittenhouse. Let's be clear about this. So I understand how people could want to make these comparisons, and I understand it. I get it. And to a certain extent, it makes sense. But the mainstream media in the United States is bullshit. Because a lot of the mainstream media were putting this out there that, hey, Kyle Rittenhouse, he has connections to this. He did this. He drove across state lines with his gun. He actually didn't. Sure, he drove across state lines, but the gun that he used was already at a friend's house in Wisconsin. So which is it? Did he drive across state lines with an AR-15, or based upon the facts of the case, was the gun already in Wisconsin and he drove across state lines? Which is it? All I know is this, Colin. I am beyond tired of the bullshit in this country, because again, if police didn't have unmitigated power to do whatever the hell they wanted to do with anybody, including the root cause of this whole Kyle Rittenhouse situation, which came from Rustin Shesky shooting Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. People need to figure this out. People need to look at this. People need to look into this more deeply and look at the root cause of this whole situation. It's not just a matter of saying, well, yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse, he's another one of these bad kids that does some wild shit. All right. And the other thing that I think we need to have in this country that needs to be a serious discussion with respect to gun culture is there needs to be a true cultural autopsy of the United States. Why does this country consistently put out people like a Kyle Rittenhouse or a Timothy McVeigh or a Ted Kaczynski? Or if we want to go to the white female situation, why do they keep putting out Amy Coopers? Why do they keep putting out Amy Coopers? You see what I'm saying? She was the lady with from the Central Park.
Right.
Right? Why do they keep putting out? Why did this country consistently produce white women that weaponize their whiteness against black men? Why does this consistently happen? We see these situations. Look at Emmett Till and Carolyn Bryant. There's a history behind this. Why does this consistently happen year after year, decade after decade, and for instance, for the historical purposes, century after century? Why does this continually happen? There needs to be a serious cultural autopsy of the United States. And let's not forget, when we talk about gun culture in the United States, the Second Amendment of the United States says the right to bear arms. Okay? The right to bear arms. Black people did not get anything from the Constitution of the United States until the 13th Amendment in 1865, which basically said that black folks were no longer treated as property or 3/5 of a human being. Black people are oh, guess what? You're human beings. We had to fight for that too. Just like my shirt says, humanity, freedom, equality, and survival. We had to fight to prove that we were actual Homo sapiens, humans that have rights, that have feelings, they have the ability to marry and have children and reproduce and have our own property and own our own land and grow our own vegetables and eat our own food and practice our own religions and enjoy our own cultures. We had to fight for all of that. And the 13th Amendment gave us that right. But think about how embedded gun culture is. The First Amendment of the Constitution affords 5 freedoms: freedom of assembly, peaceable assembly, freedom to petition your government for redress of grievances, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. The Second Amendment of the United States talks about the ability to have guns. Nothing about, hey, you're allowed to have food or clothing or shelter or, treat people or not have slaves. Think about that.
Right.
Further on down the line, we get to, oh, you see these black folks here? All right, we won't make you slaves anymore. We won't enslave you anymore, but then we'll fuck it up later on down the line by creating Jim Crow and convict leasing and redlining and blockbusting and all this other stuff to really fuck it up for black people. But think about that. That's how embedded gun culture is in this country. First Amendment said, yep, 5 freedoms that everybody gets. Everybody supposedly gets. Second is guns. Black people, 13th Amendment later on. And then, even then, black people didn't get equal protection under the law, which is why you had the 14th Amendment. And then the 15th Amendment said, women? We don't care about you all. We don't want you voting on anything. So we'll give you a 15th Amendment, so we'll let you vote. We'll let women vote. Actually, not even let women vote. We'll let black people vote, black men vote, because the 15th, women weren't allowed to vote until the 19th Amendment.
Right.
So again, when we talk about the gun culture of the United States, the gun culture, and I hate using this phrase, is in the fabric of the United States. What do you think the stars and stripes came from? Where the flag was created. It was created as a result of war, a response to war, and the Union Jack and the British flag and the stars and stripes. And it was as a result of weapons being used against the British. And then the Confederate flag, the Dixie flag, the stars and bars came as a result of in response to the American flag. Yeah. So gun culture in this country is embedded. And the next time somebody does anything about a school shooting will be the first time. And I guarantee you there's probably going, not that I even want to put energy into this, but there's going to be some other mass shooting somewhere in the country sometime soon. Sometime in the not too distant future. And then you're going to have a bunch of politicians getting on camera. Oh, thoughts and prayers. We're giving our love to the family. We're sending them flowers. We're offering them support. We're doing this. No, there needs to be some true gun legislation. And I'm a firm proponent and believer in just getting rid of guns.
Right.
Fuck it.
That's not going to be popular, but I appreciate you saying that.
What do you need a gun for?
Right. I mean, there's something I wanted to add to what you were saying. And I made this comment on Twitter. I found it very interesting that, and I was able to catch this maybe last week, that, the black bourgeoisie class came out in force, for Kyle and saying their talking points, regarding black culture and all of that stuff and yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
But when we need them for universal issues such as
healthcare,
housing,
student loan debt.
Right. You don't
legalizing marijuana nationwide.
Right. You don't hear from them. So for me, just noticing that, I was just kind of and I put up this tweet while you were talking, but I'll put it up again.
Okay.
Brother Malcolm, I need to read his autobiography again because
me too.
Because he definitely was way ahead of his time.
And
back
unfortunately,
in
his
the
time was
day.
cut short by the federal government.
Right. And rest in peace to
His
his
daughter,
daughter.
Malik.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he said, this is the media, irresponsible media. It will make the criminal look like he's a victim and make the victim look like a criminal. If you aren't careful, the media will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. This sort of a propaganda tactic is what I would call psychological warfare.
Yes.
And I think, I saw this, last week in terms of, and I love the left. I love many of my comrades on the left. And
Right.
I also kind of attribute this to cancel culture too, which I'm not a fan of necessarily.
Agreed.
But I mean, as I said, I had conversations with people who think very differently about guns in general, and I appreciate those people to kind of share because it does give me some perspective as to, like, while Kyle was handling a gun and how it's more common, than I would necessarily think it is because I never really grew up around guns. I've shot a gun, but I never grew up around guns. I grew up in the UK. They don't have guns, so um, it was there was learning to be had in my from my take, given my bias, and I admit my bias here. But I get kind of tired of, in general, how we cannot necessarily have conversations based on perspective
Right.
or having people who might think slightly differently on the issue that you may not necessarily agree, without people kind of saying, oh, well, I'm just going to cancel you because you need to think exactly as I think, feel
Yep.
exactly as I feel. We
Mhm.
saw this in January 6th. And and I kind of saw it again, like in
Yeah.
terms of how people were just on the left eating each other, on account of, yeah, this is not an open and shut, like, this is a very nuanced case. And I think this could be worth, well, probably not now, but like just kind of what you kind of described within the last few minutes. Like, this is kind of worth, like, a study. Like, this is something that you have to dissect and analyze and really kind of go deep into it. It's not as necessarily as clear cut as what people, I think, even the media are putting it out to be. And so for people to just kind of be like, oh, I don't like you, I'm not talking to you, I'm following you because you disagree with this talking point, is not, it's not helpful. And I think ultimately, like, the establishment is winning because we can't even get it together as far as, you don't have to think the same way I think. You just have to kind of follow in solidarity, as far as the things ultimately within the big picture that are important. Like,
Correct.
so for me, as I said, Kyle was irrelevant to me. Like, as I said, he's a dime a dozen. Do we need to have conversations about gun control and some sort in this country? Absolutely. But I just feel like, and again, I blame the media, for, I think, essentially kind of fucking up the information so that people would think one way. Like, I'm sure, like, some people might feel like, oh, he shot Jacob Blake, like, if you don't really think about it too hard. So I think just even in that, it's just very messy,
Mhm.
on the account of media. And even on the left, we're not immune to culture issues. So I just think all of this is just a cultural based issue / problem that has really no validity to me necessarily in this case, because ultimately it's just a distraction from larger problems that we have
I agree.
in this country
I
that
agree.
I think it just took away the focus completely.
I agree. And it alludes exactly to what I said a few minutes ago. or really about 15 to 20 minutes ago, the Kyle Rittenhouse situation will have you believe that Kyle Rittenhouse shot three black people or
Right.
shot Jacob Blake. He did none of those things. He killed two other white people and wounded a third. So there's your race. Okay, where
Right.
is that?
Right.
But again, it goes back to the bigger issue. And I do agree with you that gun control is an issue that needs to be addressed in America. But the root cause of us knowing who Kyle Rittenhouse is has little to do with an AR-15, but it has a whole lot to do with a police officer shooting an unarmed black person 7 times in the back. This is a policing situation, is the root cause of why while the world knows who Kyle Rittenhouse is.
Mm-hmm.
The root cause of Kyle Rittenhouse is not him being able to shoot an AR-15 during a protest. The root cause is why did this protest begin in the first place? And the protest began because Officer Rustin Sheskey, a white police officer, shot an unarmed black man, Jacob Blake, 7 times in the back. And Rustin Sheskey faced no disciplinary action, and he is back on the job. That is the issue that nobody is talking about right now.
Right.
What about that? Oh, by the way, what about Jacob Blake and his kids? What about that? Are we even talking about that anymore? No. Because Jacob Blake, Jacob Blake, hey, whatever, and again, and this is something that, I've taken a step back from in terms of watching a whole lot of not only leftist media, but media in general. When I got COVID, I kind of just needed to take a break from everything and clear my mind and just get away from it. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing it now again. The left on Twitter is the most toxic part of Twitter. The left is even more, the right isn't nearly as toxic as the left, because the right, sure, you might have some disagreements, but they at least coalesce around general ideas that they generally agree upon. The left, there's different stratifications of the left. You have your Sam Cedar, Kyle Kulinski left. You have your Brianna Joy Gray left. You have your Nick Brana, Bernie Sanders-ish left. You have your Jimmy Dore, Ron Placone, Graham Elwood left. Right. And then you have super far left, Jill Stein, Ajamu Baraka, Howie Hawkins left. Right. And people within that diaspora can't even seem to agree on generally accepted principles that they can all accept and move forward with against to fight for humanity, freedom, equality, and survival that you see on my t-shirt. The conservatives, the right, does a considerably better job of doing this. This is why in 2022, the Democrats are fucked up and it's over. It is done for them. And in 2 years, when the Trump revenge tour is in full swing, watch him come back into office. At this time, I think Trump is going to do something slightly different. I don't think Mike Pence will be his vice president. I don't think he'll do it at all. I think Trump will go ahead and play along with the whole culture war situation.
Oh, yeah.
I think he'll totally go ahead and do this. And it would not surprise me if Donald Trump has a female vice president. And I could tell you who I think it might be. I could see Nikki Haley being that vice president. In fact, I think Nikki Haley would be a perfect vice president for Trump. Here's why. Because Nikki Haley also has Eastern Indian roots, just like the current vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris. Right. So now, which is it? Do we have Nikki Haley, who is Indian, who has Indian heritage, who grew up in South Carolina, or who's more Indian? Who's more Indian? Is it Kamala Harris more Indian than Nikki Haley? Who's more Indian? Or the other obvious person that we put at the vice presidential role under Trump is Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem, I think, is the governor of, I want to say, North Dakota, if I'm not mistaken. She's in her late 40s to early 50s. I can completely see her being Trump's vice presidential candidate.
Mhm.
Because, hey, if we're going to go ahead and trot out the rotting corpse of Joe Biden, or we're going to have Kamala Harris as potentially the presidential nominee in 2024, certainly Trump would want his share of ammunition to have go against a woman who could potentially be the president of the United States. So, so I could totally see that happening. Or Trump finds a conservative black woman that we've never heard of, and then say, well, wait a minute, who? Like, for example, the current lieutenant governor of Virginia.
Yeah.
I forget her name, but she's a
Yeah.
conservative, gun-toting black woman.
Right.
Maybe she's the candidate. Maybe Candace Owens is the candidate. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Kimberly Klacik, Kim Klacik, who's a conservative politician from Maryland. Maybe she's it. I don't know, but I can totally see this happening with when Trump runs again in 2024 and more than likely wins the presidential election. More than likely, because the Democrats had every opportunity to secure this bag. This is the easiest presidential election I've ever seen in my life to win. Ever. All anybody had to do was get on stage anywhere and say one of these 5 things. Hey, if you elect or re-elect me, I will put money in your pocket, keep you in your home, get rid of your student debts, give you health care, and legalize weed. I'll do these things. If either one of those presidential candidates said we're willing to do one of those things, they would have won the president, or just not even do it, but say they were going to do it.
Right.
They would have won the presidency in a landslide. This would have been Ronald Reagan, Walter Mondale scorecard numbers. This would have been a virtual shutout if this was boxing, 12 rounds to 0, 120 to 108 scorecards. This would have been a big victory. But no, neither presidential candidate actually gives a shit about the people. And we already know Trump is a complete narcissist and a nincompoop, and Biden is a neoliberal shapeshifter, and who's Mr. Credit Card, Senator Credit Card, if you will. So this would have been the easiest election to win. Colin, this is why neither you nor I could ever be president of the United States. Well, neither of us could be president because we weren't born in this country anyway.
Right.
But we couldn't be president of the United States either because we actually care about people, number one. But number two, we would actually do shit that benefits people.
Right.
And let me tell you, if I became president of the
They'll
United
kill
States,
us first before we even get there. So don't even try.
There's that too. But the first thing, if I became president of the United States, one of the first things I would, all those fucked up laws that Joe Biden did that I explained earlier on, I'm repealing all of them. And I don't care if I get carpal tunnel syndrome from all the executive orders that I would write up. Oh boy, what? Next thing, Section 1881A, giving everybody health care. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're doing that. I'll figure out a way to pass HR 40. That way we can get Sandy Darity on in the cabinet. That way we can figure out reparations for American descendants of enslaved Africans. Oh, I would do so much shit. And I would be a one-term president because I don't want to be a two-term dude. I just want to do a bunch of shit, get out and just keep playing shows and hang out with my daughter's soccer games. That's it. I don't want to be president of the United States for 8 years. No, shit. I don't even want to be here for 4 years. Give me 90 days. I'll fix this shit. I'll fix it. Executive orders. Defund the Pentagon. $780 billion going to the Pentagon, and we have homeless people? Nah. Create a housing first program. Create a jobs program based upon having internet for all and housing for all. Easy job programs. You know how much people need internet that don't have internet across this country? You know how many good paying jobs that you could have for laying internet fiber optic wires and cables across this country? You know how much good paying jobs you would have for that? A demilitarized Green New Deal? Oh my goodness, come on. You kidding me? Let's fix the infrastructure. I was in Europe. I've been in Europe for almost a month. I took some of those trains across Germany. Clean trains, gorgeous trains. They're efficient. Oh, and guess what? They have Wi-Fi. All of them. And their bathrooms are clean. And they're, guess what? The people that work for DB, Deutsche Bahn, which is the main train company in Germany, they're all getting health care and their wages are quite good. And let me guess, and if they don't like that what the employer is doing, they have the opportunity to unionize, which is something that most people in the United States don't have the opportunity to do. And unionization is a human right. Look up Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have the ability to unionize, or what's called collectively organize. And we can't even do that because guess who? Joe Biden helped write NAFTA, which essentially crushed labor unions.
Right. So since you mentioned him, let's switch into Obama for a second. So I need to share my screen, but
Yes,
shout out to Fred Hampton leftist Nick, known as Socialist MMA.
Yep.
So he sent a tweet on Halloween when he was on Jimmy Dore's show, talking about the NBA strike.
Yes.
And so actually, I'm going to play it for people who do not know, if I can get it. All right.
We'll touch on this, especially.
Oh, no. No, that's not it. See, I'm learning how to do all of this shit.
No, that's all good. It's all good, bro. It's all good. Trust me.
See, I'm learning. Oh, hold on. So share screen. Share that. I think I got it this time. All right, got it. So I'll just play what Nick said here.
We'll touch on this, especially with Barack Obama coming out against the NBA strike. You guys see Striketober right now, right? And you guys see the amount strikes are picking up. You guys understand that's why Barack Obama killed the NBA strike, because strikes are inherently infectious.
Yes.
So once one group of workers see another group of workers striking, they say, shit, the stuff they asking for, we should ask for, right? So if the NBA strike would have happened, that would have made the basketball stopping. Do you understand the amount of headlines? And so many of us black leftists, when we was covering this issue at the time, there was so much rage on our behalf, especially for someone coming from an African-American community where NBA basketball is a giant thing that everyone follows. I promise you, if the NBA strike would have happened, the eyes of, and I'm speaking just on behalf of my community here, the eyes of the entire Black America would have been on it. Why they're striking? Wait, that's some good ideas. Like, especially when we start asking for healthcare and police reform, like we're doing that stuff. This will spread massive awareness. That's what Obama stopped. And this is his role. His role is to stop the Overton window from moving to the left at all costs. That's his role. And he's going to be playing that role in a very effective way for next.
So Nick basically said in regards to the NBA strike that it would have got the country's, especially Black community in this country's attention. And then I saw that and I added, following his thread, I'll add to what Nick said here.
We'll touch on this, especially with
an NBA strike would have ripple effects among the African diaspora worldwide. The NBA's watching among Black people throughout the world, and players striking could have been a catalyst for transformational change in diaspora.
Agreed.
Then I added, there was a potential movement that Barack Obama stopped. Barack Obama is now on the side of Black people. You added, and I want you to share more.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot I did this, man.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You added, and I want you to share about this because you've mentioned this to me before, but I don't know sports that at all. So, but I think from what you shared with me about this, I think it's very important for the community to hear this in connection to Obama. So you said another reason why I'm not watching the NBA now, that Ali moment was staring them in the face and they caved.
Yep.
The NBA's wildcat strike forced other sports leagues to shut down during the same weekend. 3 days later, back to the status quo. LeBron should have refused Obama.
Yep.
So can you explain to the audience what you mean by, I call it the Ali effect. So can you share more about what that is?
Yeah, and again, we spent so much time talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, and this happened, I want to say, August 25th or 26th of 2020. It was
Yeah.
around that time.
Mhm.
And it was the Milwaukee Bucks. It was they were playing an NBA playoff game in Milwaukee. And the Milwaukee Bucks players decided to not play in the playoff game. And I think it was on a Friday. And in fact, it was the same day that, guess who? Jacob Blake was shot by Rustin Shesky 7 times in the back.
Right.
The
Lots of
NBA
connections,
a
basically.
lot of connections, correct. The NBA players said, you know what, we're not doing this. Other sports leagues followed. And LeBron James consulted with the Milwaukee Bucks and said, hey, okay, the Lakers, we're not playing this. We're not doing any of this. And we're sitting this one out. We're sitting this one out. And what I said in that tweet is that Barack Obama went ahead and contacted Chris Paul and LeBron James and basically convinced them to stop the strike. If either of them had any sort of leadership, and Chris Paul, I think, is the president of the NBA, of the players, not the Players Association. That's Michelle Roberts. She's the representative for the labor side of the players. But in terms of the players themselves, they have a player representative. And I think that person is Chris Paul. If Chris Paul had any sort of anything, and again, I don't want to speak bad about Chris Paul because he's a fellow Wake Forest alumni, just like yours truly. But I have a huge problem with athletes supporting a president that truly does not care about Black people. And I have no problem saying what I'm going to say next. Barack Obama is a white supremacist. Why? Because he's done nothing substantive for Black people, ever. He's never done anything for Black people. The only Black person he cares about is himself, his wife, and his kids. That's it. Nobody else. He threw that reverend, the Black reverend that he was involved with for all those years out of Chicago, Reverend Wright. He threw him under the bus. Okay, when it was time to publicly defend a Black Harvard professor by the name of Dr. Henry Louis Gates, when Henry Louis Gates was unlawfully arrested and almost shot to death by police officers, what did he do? Instead of excoriating the police officers and calling for any sort of meaningful police reform, he ended up having a beer summit at the White House with him, Joe Biden, the cop, and Dr. Gates.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, this is a Black person in Barack Obama who cannot publicly defend a Black professor at an Ivy League university in front of white people. Oh, goodness gracious. Barack Obama wrote 2 books, 2 autobiographies before the world knew about him. He then comes out during this latest presidential election and debuts a 3rd autobiography and then has a 4th on the way. How arrogant of a motherfucker do you have to be to write 4 books about yourself? This is who he is. This is who Obama is. I can't stand him. I can't stand him. I can't stand him. I don't like him. The less I see of him, the better. But my point with Obama is this. Obama cares more about drone strikes than he does about workers' strikes. And that's proven to be true. That's proven to be true because look at what he did at DAPL. Look at what he did at DAPL. Conversely, that was essentially a workers' strike or some sort of collective action. Conversely, look at what he did in the Middle East. He ran out of bombs in Syria. He was drone striking people, and most of the people he killed were women and children that had nothing to do with the conflict in the Middle East, and the war in the Middle East. Nothing to do with it. So LeBron James had an opportunity to sit this whole thing out and shut this whole thing down. He had an opportunity to do something that was bigger than making movies and selling Nikes. He had an opportunity. It was staring him in the face. It was staring him in the face. He could have said, you know what, Barack, I respect you, first Black president. We're going to sit this out. And we're going to stand for something a bit bigger than just playing basketball. And when Laura Ingraham said, shut up and dribble, and everybody on Black Twitter was like, oh, who the hell is this white woman telling Black people to shut up and dribble? Well, guess what?
He did.
A Black man told you shut up and dribble, and no one said a fucking word about it.
Right.
No one said anything about it. So it's unacceptable for a white woman to tell LeBron to shut up and dribble, but it's okay for a Black person to essentially say the same thing, shut up and dribble, and just go ahead and play basketball. Know your role, shut your mouth, win an NBA championship. That's essentially what Barack Obama said. Take a look again. Take a look at what Laura Ingraham said, and take a look at what Barack Obama said and did. Okay, all Laura Ingraham said was shut up and dribble. Barack Obama said shut up and dribble and stop striking and stop fighting for the rights of other Black people and stop trying to do something for your community. Which is worse? Which is worse? A conservative white woman on a conservative news network, Fox, saying, hey, LeBron, shut up and dribble. Or Barack saying, yo, guys, shut up and dribble and don't stand for anything of any substance. And we'll go ahead and talk to the NBA Players Association. We'll talk to Adam Silver, and we'll get them to put Black Lives Matter on the basketball courts. And you can put a couple of fancy catchphrases in the back of your jerseys. And that'll be about it. But we won't really do anything to substantively improve the lives and human conditions of Black people in this country. We won't do anything about police reform. We won't do anything about eliminating food deserts. We won't do anything about fixing schools. We won't worry about getting people of Flint, Michigan, or Baltimore, Maryland, or New York City, or Washington, D.C. clean water. We won't worry about any of that. We won't worry about removing asbestos composite tiles in many of these dilapidated housing projects across the country. We won't do anything about that. No. Because I want to make sure that we have bourgeoisie Black people in front of everybody to mask the true human condition of African Americans in this country. And Barack Obama was a sheepdog to white supremacy. And I've lived through a bunch of every president has been bad in my lifetime. Every single one of them. Every one of them. Reagan, horrible. Clinton was particularly destructive because, and again, going back to the Black bourgeoisie class, there were Black bourgeoisie Negroes in the early 90s saying that Bill Clinton was the first quote unquote Black president.
Yeah.
What the fuck were you talking about? What the hell were you thinking? Really? He was the first Black president because he was Baptist? He was Baptist, grew up in Arkansas, hung out with a few Black people and played a saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show? He was the first Black president that had no problem locking up your dad and your mom and your uncle for minor drug crimes. That's how Black he was, right? And guess what? And Barack Obama had no problem doing all the same shit that Clinton did. Because again, if you look at Barack Obama's cabinet, much of that cabinet came from Clinton.
Right.
Much of it came from Clinton. And if you look at a lot of Biden's cabinet, much of Biden's cabinet came from the remnants of Obama. And Obama's biggest failures, and I think Obama's 8 years was an entire failure, but Obama's biggest failure was the failure to not do anything about Black people and about police officers for Black people. He had an opportunity to do something about it, and he did nothing for it. He did nothing about it. He could have done something with healthcare, failed to do that. He could have stopped all these wars in the Middle East. He went the other way and added 5 countries to the roster. He could have done something about the banks. Nope. He could have bailed out the people instead of the banks. He failed to do that. Barack Obama is the worst president of my lifetime. The worst president of my lifetime. And again, when I was screaming at the top of my lungs last summer saying, yo, you don't want Biden as president. You don't want Biden as president. And again, where in the hell are all these idiots on the left that said, hey, let's get Biden elected, let's get Biden elected, and then we'll push him left.
Right.
Quite honestly, the stuff that Biden has been doing now in the past little more than 300 days or so, quite honestly, has been to the right of Trump.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's been to the right of Trump. At least Trump consistently put money in unemployed people's pockets. Biden hasn't done that. In fact, Biden cut short many of the social programs that were designed to help people during the pandemic.
Right.
At least Trump was like, we'll try to do some shit. We'll try to do something for people. And then Nancy Pelosi consistently was like, oh, well, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. Look, I got a few thousand followers on Instagram. I got a few thousand followers on Facebook. I got a few thousand followers on Twitter. I could find 538 people randomly throughout all of my social media accounts, and I could put 538 people in the halls of Washington, D.C., and we would do a better job than the 538 people that are there right now, because they are all useless shills, all of them. And quite on, and I said this in the interview that I did during the Andrew Brown Jr. protest, which became part of an art exhibit in Rome, Italy, and I know we wanted to talk about that. I said in that interview in Elizabeth City, North Carolina on April 29th, I said there is no use for the Congressional Black Caucus.
No.
None. Because what has the Congressional Black Caucus done to alleviate the consistent suffering of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color in these United States? Nothing. And there's also no use for the squad. There's no use for Pramila Jayapal. There's no use for AOC. There's no use for Jamal Bowman. There's no use for Ilhan Omar. There's no use for Raphael Warnock. There's no use for oh gosh, who else? I'm forgetting somebody.
I mean, it doesn't matter, but
Rashida Tlaib. There's
Yeah.
no use for her. There's no use for any of these people, anybody in the squad. None of them. And again, I said this in my interview on April 29th with our dear friend John Farina. The next time they do something for Black people will be the first time.
Right.
The next time. And quite honestly, the next time they do something for the people that their constituencies will be the first time. None of these people care about anybody, which is again why I'm consistently calling for worker strikes across this country. Shut every fucking thing down in this country. No truck driving, no slicing deli meat at your local Safeway, no HVAC repairs in Arizona, no UPS trucks driving across the country. Shut down FedEx, shut down everything. And this involves sports leagues too. These athletes had an opportunity to do something bigger than them, more than just their shoe contracts, more than their endorsement deals, more than their social media profiles or their quote unquote brands. What about that? Do something bigger than yourself. Stand up for something more than just your legacy on the basketball court. What about having a legacy off the court or off the field? This is why Colin Kaepernick, what he has done so far has been nothing short of brilliant. Nothing short of brilliant. He is that seminal figure that people I think should be paying more attention to. Okay? He's the person, and again, him and Eric Reed. And again, sure, nothing's perfect. No one's perfect. Neither was Ali. But at least they sacrificed something for the greater good of their people. These current NBA players don't do shit, which is why I'm not watching any of them. I'm not watching the National Football League either, because the National Football League cares more about their players hitting women than making sure the players are safe. That's what they care about. They don't care about anything but making money. None of them do in the National Football League. And they rolled over when it was time to do something, and Jerry Jones said, "Oh, my players are going to not, or they're not going to take a knee. They're going to stand for the national anthem." And Roger Goodell, the worthless shill that he is, said, "Oh, you know what? We're going to not side with the players. We're going to side with the labor owners." And I want people to understand who Roger Goodell actually is. You know, Roger Goodell's father was a state senator out of New York State. You do realize this, right?
I actually didn't realize that. No.
There's more to this. Roger Goodell's wife is a lady named Jane Skinner. Do you know who Jane Skinner is?
No.
Jane Skinner used to be a news lady on Fox. She used to work for Fox. Okay. Jane Skinner's father was Sam Skinner. Sam Skinner was the former chief of staff to George Bush. Roger Goodell has political connections all the way through this.
Mm-hmm.
So do you understand why the National Football League rolled over like a donut when it was time to actually do something for the majority of their workforce, which is Black people? And do you understand why the NFL Players Association president, DeMaurice Smith, is another one of these Black bourgeoisie people that doesn't give a shit about their players? Useless. I'm not watching any of these athletes. Fuck all of them. I'm not watching the NFL. I'm not watching the NBA. They're all worthless shills. You can keep your $1 million contracts. There's a wonderful book that I think it was William Roden, who's a wonderful writer for the New York Times, wrote. He called the name of the title of the book was The $40 Million Slave. The $40 Million Slave. And there's never been more accurate than what I'm talking about right now, because that's what these athletes have become. They've become enslaved to their teams. They've been There's no difference between the NFL draft or NFL combine and enslaved Africans in the 1800s and 1700s being selected by their white slave masters. There's no real difference. You find the biggest and the strongest who can do the best work for you. And when you completely destroy their bodies and use them up, you discard them and you find more bodies. You find more bodies. It's the brutalization of black bodies for white entertainment that is absolutely fucking disgusting in this country. And we consistently see it. We consistently see it. And these athletes had a chance to do something bigger than themselves, and they failed. They failed miserably. They failed miserably. And that inability to borrow a phrase from sports, to step up to the plate, nah, no respect for me at all. And I don't care if they don't care about what I have to say, but because I know this much, there's a whole lot of people that are out here like me. They're probably like, you know what, Joe, you're damn right. I'm not watching the National Football League. I can do other stuff on a Sunday. Fuck the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl doesn't want to actually have any culturally relevant entertainment anyway. They want to roll out the same 5 bands that nobody cares about, nobody's heard of. How many times you got the fucking Rolling Stones playing the same shit over and over and over again at the Super Bowl? What about having Earth, Wind, and Fire at the Super Bowl? Huh? Philip Bailey can still sing.
So that would be a hot show.
Let me tell you something. I won't watch the game, but I'll watch Philip Bailey and the Phoenix Horns go for it for 35 minutes. I'll watch that. And if Philip Bailey can still hit that high note in Reasons.
So I want to go back to what you said regarding LeBron James, that he missed his Ali moment.
Yes.
So can you share what that means?
Ali gave up the best part of his career because he cared about people, most specifically black people. LeBron James could have done the same thing. LeBron James is one of the 2 or 3 most powerful athletes in the world. It's between him, Cristiano Ronaldo, and probably Lewis Hamilton. And Lewis Hamilton is biracial and British. So LeBron James could have done something about this. LeBron James, I'm not saying LeBron James could have given reparations for American descendants of enslaved Africans. But at least he could have continued to put that conversation in the forefront. LeBron James could have seen all of these people that spend hundreds of dollars on his shoes to do something about potentially getting school lunch programs in inner city schools, or doing something about childhood education, or trying to get more funding for education, or doing something about healthcare. He could have done at least something somewhere along the lines, somewhere. And it's all well and good that he has his own school. That's great. But you know what? There's other people that live outside of Akron that need help. And he could have done that. There's a lot of people that look up to him. There's a lot of people that look up to Kevin Durant. There's a lot of people that look up to a lot of these NFL players that they could have done something collectively. And again, my uncle told me this years ago, and I never forgot it. He said, Joe, you got to move as a fist, not as fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that again. You got to move as a fist, not as fingers, because you can't make an impact as fingers. When you come together as a fist, that's when you make an impact. Okay? And they could have
need that lesson for the left too.
You heard that. You heard it. You heard it. You said it, and I heard it, and everybody else did too. But he had his moment. He could have sat out, and I guarantee you, if he sits out, a whole bunch of other players sit out. And if he sits out and other players sit out, guess what? Other leagues sit out. Other sports leagues sit out. How much do you? And again, this is bigger than just sports and politics.
No, and that's why I said, because this would have been shown worldwide.
Think about what he could have done in terms of getting NCAA players paid,
right,
for their services.
But not only that, and
he didn't go to college,
right? But people in Africa watch NBA, or at least know of. players who go in the NBA. And the
Look how many
fact that,
Africans
again,
play in the NBA now
right.
who
And
are
the
from
fact
who are of
that
African descent.
right. And the fact that George Floyd, as I shared on many streams before, like when that whole thing was going on, the first people who called me to check in on me wasn't anyone in this country. It was
Nope.
my Ugandan, who I call brothers and sisters,
Yeah,
who called in to check on me,
yeah,
and they would be the most far removed from the situation than we are. But the fact that they called me first was very significant to me. But all that to say is, and these are the conversations that now that I've been traveling to East Africa that I'm beginning to have now, because they do ask that, or they have asked, Uncle, how is it that it's only Black people that play on these sports teams, and I can't necessarily answer. Well, I can now, but back when they were asking me this, I didn't necessarily have the platform to really kind of say anything to them at the time.
sure.
But this would have brought up, so really to go with Obama, like he is a dangerous motherfucker, basically,
He's the
because
worst of the
he
worst.
not only he destroyed a movement that could have revolutionized the diaspora as a whole in
Yes.
regard to what the NBA was willing to do,
Yes.
that everyone would have been watching. And then, so like people in Africa to be like, oh, they're striking. What's that? What are they doing over there? That could have gave them some ideas as far as the issues that are occurring in their countries.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that, so I love what Nick said, but I think it's more devious than that, just in terms of what happened in the country. That could have mobilized the world.
Yes.
The whole diaspora. And the fact that Obama put a stop to that, is really significant. And it is sad that people, I think especially Black people, are not necessarily making that connection. But yeah, just with what he did to kind of shut down the strikes of the NBA was really,
it was a massive butterfly effect.
Right.
Yep. And the fact, it's not even just the fact that Black people are upset or aren't upset that Obama shut down this whole worker strike, this wildcat strike. It's the fact that most Black people on the left aren't even aware of how the potential butterfly effect of everything that could have happened if this worker strike had gone through, and did a sustained effort, not only within, and I keep saying this, intra-industry and inter-industry. If you had a bunch of striking NBA players, the NFL would have shut down. And let me tell you, there's a bunch of really good Black and Latino and Afro-Latino baseball players. You think they would have said, hey, you know what? Shit. Because again, the whole situation with George Floyd and police violence, for every George Floyd that was killed, there's a Javier Ordóñez in Bogota, Colombia that was killed. 41-year-old attorney got killed with a knee to the neck. Okay. There's a lady named, I think her name was Ana Luis Salazar. She was a El Salvadorian refugee that got killed in Mexico City by the knee to the neck by the police. So you don't think that the women's the women's tennis association wouldn't have shut it down? You don't think they would have paid attention? You think Serena and Venus and Sloane Stephens would have been like, yo, you know what? And Madison Keys, these were all Black women tennis players, would have been like, oh shit, you know what? Yeah, let's not play. Let's not play. We're not doing this. You think Tiger Woods in his palatial estates in Florida would have gotten out of back surgery and traction and massage therapy and said, hey, you know what? Yeah, this George Floyd shit is fucked up. I'm not playing golf anytime soon. Right. Oh, and I'm also canceling that contract with Nike until they actually get rid of sweatshop labor.
Right.
You think the biggest problem that I have with athletes right now in America, and I'm specifically saying America, is I'm not sure they realize how much power they have. And then they're unafraid to use it because they're more worried about their brand rather than helping people.
Well, I think that goes to, again, as you've said, white supremacy. It's the fact that white supremacists will allow like a couple of us in their circle, the epsilons of their circle, if you will.
Yep.
And once those 1 or 2 spots are taken, then it's like, fuck, what is going to happen to the rest of us?
That's it.
So
it same shit happens in the music industry. This is why you couldn't have a bunch of eccentric black hip hop artists in the 80s and 90s. You couldn't have a bunch of people like the Fugees running around.
Right.
You couldn't have that. You couldn't have and I love her music. How many Tracy Chapmans could you really have in the music industry back in 1988? Well, there's probably a bunch of lesbian black women that could sing just as well or better than Tracy Chapman, but the music industry wasn't trying to have that. No.
Right.
You can't have that. No fucking way. No. Then Lauryn Hill left the Fugees and became Lauryn Hill.
Mm-hmm.
How many Lauryn Hills are you going to have?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? This is just such a fucked up world we live in because there's a consistent control of what's happening with black people by white people, by white folks. And I just I'm really tired of America. I'm really tired of America.
Yeah.
Right? People say America the beautiful. No, America, it's not beautiful anymore.
No.
In fact, it never has been.
No.
It really never has been. There's a wonderful book that I'm reading right now by Chris Hedges. It's called America, the Farewell Tour. And he wrote that book in 2018. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. Everything he talked about that book is coming to fruition now. Everything. And I think the sooner people realize what is actually happening to America and what is happening not just to black people, but there's a whole lot of poor and lower class white folks and low earning white folks that are dealing with the same shit too. Right. The only difference between a poor white person and a poor black person is white privilege.
Right.
That is the difference. And all of the benefits that white privilege comes with it, like generational wealth.
Right.
That's why a poor white person with a high school education can still have a higher net worth than a black person with a college degree. White privilege. But in the end, the income levels are probably similar or the same. But because you're a poor white person, you can exercise certain privileges over other black people, indigenous people, and other people of color. I'm not depressed. And I'm not going to let this depress me, because if I let this depress me, then I become useless. And I wasn't put on this earth to become useless. I wasn't put on this earth to just be nothing. I wasn't. Everybody is somebody, and so am I. And I was meant to make a difference in this world. And the more, if I consistently think about all of the bullshit that's happening in this world and let that overtake my mind and my thoughts and my everyday activities, then what good am I? Why am I here? What good am I for my daughter and her adopted sister? What good am I for the stuff that I do musically? What good am I? I had a beautiful opportunity to teach a DJing seminar this past weekend in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And it was a wonderful experience. And I shared a lot of the stuff that I had to go through to get to where I am, an international DJ that's traveled to now 50 countries, 50. And I've never made a tune in my life. I'm learning how to do that now, thanks to everybody at Ableton. But the whole concept or the whole idea of having to be twice as good it's even more than that in the music industry. You have to be a super genius.
Yeah.
You have to be Superman, Spider-Man, and Wolverine to feel like you're going to get some sort of opportunities in the music industry. The the goalposts are not 100 yards away. They're in some cases 100 miles away. And you just, that's why the other day when I got sick and I got really frustrated one day, my heart rate was about 135 beats per minute. And I just had a bad fever and I just was laying in bed. I just got angry with just everything, my life, just all of that. Not just JC saying, love Joe's set on Saturday. Good to meet you, Jace. I appreciate you. And say hi to Rob. I appreciate him too for coming out. Yeah, JC was at the show that I played in Calgary this past weekend at the Commonwealth in downtown Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So yeah, your man's international. I'm all over the world. All right, I'm all over the world. I'm worldwide. I'm like you, brother. I got 3 passports and I'm going to use them.
Right.
I'm using them judiciously. But yeah, I'm everywhere. And and I remember saying to one of the people I was talking with, and she was the only person of color in the room. And I said, look, good enough is not good enough.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to you.
Right.
So as good as you think you have to be considerably better than that just to think about getting opportunities. So good enough's not good enough. So just remember, if you don't remember anything I said about any of this, just remember I told you that. Good enough's not good enough. And I remember my dear Uncle Ansel, God rest his soul, he told me that when I was a little boy, and I never forgot that. And I think every Black person in America has somebody, or at least has heard somebody tell that to another Black person somewhere along their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a biracial daughter, and her adopted sister is Black. And you're damn right I'm telling both of them the same thing. And I'm telling them, my daughter turns 11, Parker turns 11 in about on Monday, and Zamaya just turned 6. And you're damn right I'm telling them that. And you're damn right I'm telling them that. So part of the reason why I do so much of what I do when I travel around the world and I show them videos of what I'm doing, and I show them, hey, here's your dad, and here's your dad and Mr. Joe at a protest, or hey, here's an art exhibit that in Rome, Italy, that your dad was involved in. And I was there, and I gotta talk about that because that was just.
Well, you know what?
Jesus.
I think.
Oh my
perfect.
God.
I love how you're making all these segues, but I think it's just as well we're saving the best for last. I think we've talked a bit about some very heavy topics, and I think it's good now that you're kind of entering in more lighter mode now, I think. So share about so you basically were featured in an exhibit.
I was part of it. Let me break this down because I know I talked about the Andrew Brown Jr. protest earlier on that in this interview. Mm-hmm. And I was there. It was April 29th. And it was in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and it was the date of the evidentiary hearing. And everybody on the left knows John Farina. Everybody knows him. Used to work at Status Quo. He now has his own thing on Rockfin, on Farina News, is the new journalism channel. And John is the best at what he does. He's the absolute best at what he does. He's an independent video journalist. He used to work for Status Quo. In fact, he was the guy that interviewed us about, hey, why are you involved in being a healthcare activist? Back on January 4th of this year. He was there. It was him. And we've kept in contact. We talk probably once a week. John is also the reason why anybody was able to see any of that video footage from the insurrection on January 6th inside the Capitol building. It was his video footage. So he was there. Another magnificent photographer by the name of Adam Gray, who's British, and we had a wonderful chat while we were there. And a couple of other really good photographers. My guy Ron was there, and there's another dude, Amir Al-Faki, I think his name is. He's now working for National Geographic. They were all there, and we're all watching the evidentiary hearing. And the Pasquotank County Police Department decided to not release the tapes of Andrew Brown Jr. So there was a massive protest that took place in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And as you can see on the screen, we're talking about police officers standing on the roof. There were police officers everywhere. And Elizabeth City is not big. There were probably about 500 to 600 people during the protest and easily 100 cops. Easily, maybe more than that. And then other cops from other jurisdictions started to show up. So When everybody congregated on the backside of the courthouse, there was another gathering of people there, and police were not, the main police station is on the backside of the courthouse. And a bunch of cops were there, standing on the rooftop, watching everything with weapons, and not just little Glocks or handguns, big machine guns, militarized weapons. So John's got his camera. He's like, Joe, you want to say anything? I said, yeah. So for 11 minutes, I talked about the case. I talked about why there's militarized police in the streets. I talked about how Joe Biden has been a fuck up for everything. So I talked about the brutalization of Black people in the streets for over 400 years, how Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders received a protection law, but Black people haven't received anything for over 400 years. I talked about the ineffectiveness of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Squad. I talked about where we were in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. It was only about an hour and a half away from where the first Africans were trafficked from present-day Angola on the Spanish and Portuguese slave ships to Fort Monroe, Virginia. And that's where that sign is at the fort, where it says First Africans in America. And it talks about that place being the place where enslavement in the United States happened on or about August 20th, 1619. That's where it happened. And we were 90 minutes away from where that happened. So I talked about that in an 11-minute video, in the 11-minute YouTube video that's on the Status Coup YouTube networks.
And I will clip that. I will post a link after this stream. So if anyone wants to kind of watch it in its entirety, because I think it would definitely give context to this.
Yes.
But I'll post it I'll post it below after the stream, so people can watch it.
So my dear friend Tony Cokes, he's a professor of fine arts at none other than Brown University. He contacted me when he saw the YouTube video, and he said, Joe, what you said in that video was incredibly powerful. Do you mind if I use that and create a multimedia art presentation out of it? I said, sure, brother, no problem. Go for it. So a couple of weeks later, the people at Macro, which is the Museum of Contemporary Art in Rome, Italy, asked him to do an art installation. And it was about, I think, a 2 or 3 month art installation. And there were a bunch of different videos that were involved in this video that we're seeing right now. It's called Evil 81, Is This America? And was part of a massive art installation that involved about a dozen or so videos called This Is Not Theory, This Is History, where it talked about different aspects of Black people in the United States. It talked about Aretha Franklin. It talked about the Black house music. It talked about the techno movement in Detroit, Michigan, with Kevin Saunderson and Juan Atkins and Jeff Mills. There were about a dozen and maybe 15 different videos. And one of the videos is what we're watching right now, which is the words that were taken from that video from Status Coup. And there's different music in the video we're watching right now. And it became part of an art exhibit. And when I was sick and staying in this apartment that I'm in right now, I told myself, I got to see this exhibit. This is something I need to see. This is something that, when I first showed my daughter the video.
So actually, hold on, let me give context. So this was when you had COVID. So there was a
art exhibit.
You weren't going to go.
There's a possibility I wasn't going to see this exhibit. I wasn't going to see it. But then I got well enough in time, and I was able to get out of the country in time, and I saw the exhibit on the last day of its existence. So when it
was the last day.
When I left America on October 19th, the exhibit was ending on October 20th. I left America on October 19th, flew from here to Newark, New Jersey to Rome, Italy. Plane landed in Rome, got to the hotel, hung out for a little bit, went to the art exhibit. Walked around the corner to Macro, and I saw it. And I said this to a few other people in a couple other conversations that I've had. Seeing this, what we're watching right now on the screen, on a massive screen with a loud sound system, it wasn't as professionally gratifying as getting 2 master's degrees from 2 different universities and 2 different subjects in 4 years, and getting good grades at both schools, I might add. It wasn't as personally satisfying as the birth of my daughter almost 11 years ago to the date. But seeing this, it's up there with both of those 2 situations I just mentioned a couple of seconds ago. I needed to see this. This was more than just, oh, I want to hang out and see it, but if I don't see it, that's cool. No. This was a mission. This was a calling. This is something that I needed for my soul. And I did it. And I couldn't, Colin, when somebody decides to take something you said and they're deeply moved to it, to the point where they want to immortalize your words in a work of art. Yet with art, there's an old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But in this instance, the pictures are words.
Right.
And what's interesting about this is when I was hanging out at the art exhibit, I was watching the other exhibits, and then other people were looking at the plaques on the walls describing the other videos. And I was like, yo, that's me. And people were like, really? You're Joe Nice? I was like, yeah, that's me. It's going to be shown on that video. And I ended up talking to a bunch of other people from other countries that had no idea about what was happening in America.
Yeah.
I ended up and a bunch of other people who, in the probably 2.5 or 3 months of this exhibit, were watching not just all of the other videos, but this video here. And we're like, well, wait a minute. Why? Wow, is America really doing this to its people? Is America really doing this with police officers and Black people? What's really happening here? So the fact that what I said in that 11-minute video that John took with Status Coup on April 29th, and people from other countries, people from around, not just Italians, but there were other people from other countries there hanging out, seeing it. In fact, there were 2 people I ended up talking with, and they were both from Colombia. Mm-hmm. We now follow each other on Instagram, and we chat here and there from time to time. There was another lady who was there, and I think she was from South Korea, and she I think goes to school there, and she had seen the exhibit a couple of times and saw not only my video but the other videos. And the fact, and I remember the day that I received the original video, and I showed it to my daughter, and my daughter started to cry. Parker started to cry, and I'm like, baby, why are you crying? And it wasn't, and I didn't know if it was about the content of the video. And her exact words were, Daddy, I'm proud of you. That's what she said to me. She said, Daddy, I am proud of you. When she said that, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
That's all I needed to hear. Daddy, I am proud of you. And and I keep telling everybody this about my little baby girl. She's the 10-year-old. She's going to be 11 next week. She's the 10-year-old that I wish I could have been when I was her age. Mm-hmm. Because she's so smart. She's so intelligent. She's so athletic. She's everything I wasn't. And yeah, she's everything I wasn't. And that's why I'm doing everything I can to pour every ounce of my energy into her, so she can go ahead and live her dreams and live the life that she wants to live. And she doesn't have to rely on anybody else for anything. And when she feels that something's wrong, she can come to me and be like, well, look, no. You go ahead and you tell your teacher, I don't like the way you're talking to me. You go ahead and tell your gymnastics coach, no, you can say what you want, but you're not going to use these words to me like this. You're not going to speak to me with that sort of tone. You go ahead and tell your teachers this, okay? And I tell her these things because it's important, because you just can't, for everything that I've been saying for a little more than 2 hours now, and not just the emotions in my words, but the force that's coming from them. If I'm saying this to people that will eventually, hopefully, watch this conversation between me and you, brother, what do you think I'm telling my daughter? What do you think I'm telling her? What do you think I tell her every morning before she goes to school, when she's on her way to school and I FaceTime her in the morning? She jumps out of their mom's minivan on fire. She jumps out of her mom's minivan on fire. And I have to make sure I do that. I have to make sure I do that. So that's why when about an hour ago, when I was talking about, you know, everybody having a purpose and doing something bigger than you, my doing something bigger than me, it's not me, it's my little baby girl and her adopted sister. You know, Whitney Houston said years ago in 1985, she said, "I believe that children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside." That was Whitney that sung that. That ain't me that's telling you that. And it's my responsibility not only as a parent of two girls that'll eventually grow up to be women, but not just women, but Black women. But it's a responsibility of me as a Black father to both of them, and not even a blood father to Zamaya, but I'm the closest thing to a father that she has. Not just a father, but a male figure in her life. It's not only my responsibility, it's my duty to make sure I'm doing this for them. So when I travel around and I show them, hey, look, there's other stuff that's better than America or different than America. You know, when you have conversations with your classmates, you know what? Yeah, you don't have to agree with everybody else. As long, you know, and you could stand on your beliefs and you could stand up for yourself, be confident in what you're saying, and not only have it from a confidence perspective, but a knowledge perspective. Come on, girls, you can do this. No one's gonna fuck with you. And if they do, your daddy's got your back always. All right. That was the importance of this. That was the importance of me going to see this. That was the importance of me showing my daughter this and her sister Zamaya this, because it matters. It matters. And this is the kind of stuff where yes, Black people in this country may not necessarily be able to own homes and pass down any sort of generational wealth. Okay. But not every sort of wealth is measured in money. Sometimes the wealth that you get is a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from those who are your part of your family.
Yeah.
Sometimes that wealth comes in the form of a legacy that was left behind. So you can build upon that legacy that others have built for you. Sometimes it's about seeing a good example of a good example. And then you have something to go forward with. And what's the return on investment of having a good example in your life and a positive figure in your life? What's the return on investment of that? It's immeasurable. It's absolutely immeasurable. So this exhibit was such a big thing for me because, yeah, it was in the middle of me getting COVID. It was in the middle of me figuring out how I'm going to pay these medical bills, which I'm still kind of doing right now. But moreover, it was about knowing that what I said on that day was truth, speaking truth to power. And it's not only me as an individual and as a Black person speaking truth to power. I'm somewhat of a quote unquote known commodity, a celebrity, someone in the music industry. And there's plenty of people in the music industry that are unwilling to speak truth to power for fear of what endorsements they might lose, or fear of backlash, or quote unquote fear of cancel culture. Okay. I don't give a shit about any of that. Because long before I became a quote unquote semi-famous dubstep DJ that's traveled around the world and played a bunch of shows in a bunch of places, I was born a Black person. I was born a Black person. I was now a Black man. And there are certain things I have to speak up about. There are certain responsibilities I have. Okay. There's a whole lot of people that here that have a job, play shows, make music. For me, that's not the case. I have a responsibility. And part of that responsibility comes with being the very best, or being at my very best when it's time to be at my very best. And I don't think a lot of other people will ever understand how physically, emotionally, and psychologically taxing and exhausting that is. But it's a responsibility that I take willingly, and it's a responsibility that I'm proud to shoulder the burden for. Because I know there are other Black people, other Black musicians, other Black DJs, other Black producers that are watching what I'm doing. And they're saying to themselves, well, this motherfucker can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know if other black people are looking at me and saying that, there are other white folks that think the same thing too. And I'm happy to have them along for the ride also. But more than anything, I know there are two little girls that are about 10 or 15 minutes away from me hanging out with my ex-wife, that are looking at their daddy and saying, yeah, you know what, shit, if my dad can do this, I can do this too when I get older. So it's not only, it's all of this, Colin. It's all
Yeah.
of this, Colin. And that's why I needed to go see this exhibit. It wasn't about me saying, hey, I'm going to Rome, Italy. I'm chopping it up. I'm eating pizza in Italy. I'm hanging out. I'm going to go to the Vatican next day and chop it up. Maybe me and the Pope might shake hands and dap it up. Who knows? Whatever. Whatever. It's not about that. It was never about me. It was about knowing that the opportunity to speak truth to power was there. I took it. I didn't shy away from it. I didn't shy away from it. Okay. And if I can't, if I'm, and again, I'm not super famous, but people know who I am. In the circles that I'm in, people know who I am. But if I have the opportunity to speak truth to power and not shy away from it and not shirk from the moment, how come some of these other athletes and other famous people can't do the same?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
come? If you look on my Instagram, if you go ahead and look on my Instagram, you will see me wearing a yellow vest on every Saturday show that I play. And I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And people are like, well, Joe, why are you wearing the yellow vest? Because I remember when I was in Paris, France on April 15th and 16th, actually 14th, 15th, and 16th of 2009. I was there, the Cathedral of Notre Dame burned down. I was filming it on my Facebook page. There's a viral video that has 300,000 views on my Facebook page if you scroll back 2.5 years ago. It's there. And the people I was hanging out with, they were like, well, Joe, you know about the yellow vest? I'm like, yeah, I know about the yellow vest. I mean, I watch my share of France 24, and I don't watch any mainstream American news. And they were like, well, yo, look, could you do something to raise awareness? And I told them, I said, look, every time I play a Saturday show, I'll take a picture of me wearing a yellow vest and post it on my Instagram page. Go through and scroll back through the thousands of posts that I've had over the past couple of years. You're going to see a bunch of posts with me wearing yellow vests on a Saturday night show. And I have a little bit blurb about why I'm wearing this yellow vest and what it means. I did it this past Saturday in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And not only had a yellow vest on, but it was the Medicare for All yellow vest that Eric Kessner sent me. And I had a black beret that Laura Fielding, executive director of Red Berets for Washington, made for me while I was sick. And I talked about all of that in the post. Because again, this responsibility that I spoke about a few minutes ago, it's more than just playing shows. It's more than just power mixing. It's more than just slicing and dicing. It's more than just merch on my website, Humanity Fruit, on joenicedj.net. It's more than just that. It's stuff that's bigger than me out here, that people who don't have a voice would love to share and have, but they don't have that voice. They don't have the opportunities that I have. I've been blessed to be in a position where I am, where people see what I do, and they're at least willing to pay attention to what I'm doing. They're at least willing to pay attention. And if they want to follow along, cool. If they don't, that's cool too. But they're at least willing to watch. And if they're willing to watch, I'm going to give them something to watch. I'm going to give them something to take home. I'm going to give them something to think about. And I'm also going to give them something to shoot for. When I tell people, when people come up to me and say, yo, Joe, yo, great mix, man. Great mix, man. I want to mix just like you. My response, Colin, is always the same. I say, yo, don't mix like me. Mix better than me.
Right.
Be better than me. Don't mix like me. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Be better than me. Mix better than me. Watch what I do. Listen to my mixes. Go for it. Go for it. Don't mix like me. Don't be like me. Be better than me. Because if you, for me, it's not about cash, man. It's about the culture.
Right.
It's about the culture. And then when you think about some of the stuff that I'm involved in activism wise, it's not about me potentially getting some really good paying job somewhere and using my degrees, although that would be nice. That would be great. I would love to do that. But you know what? It's about people. It's about making sure that people have health care. It's about making sure that people have a place to live, and we eliminate food deserts and we do something bigger than us. That's why you and I have connected on so many levels, and I'm so happy that we have done that, because It's not often that you meet people where you're like, yo, I can fuck with this dude, man. He's cool. You know,
Yeah.
this cat's got his head on straight. This cat's got his shit together. And the fact that you and I share similar backgrounds obviously makes that connection deeper and easier. But
But I
y-
think for
yeah,
me, you know, I'm actually kind of glad that I saved this for last because I
yeah,
did, and I think I wanted to talk to you about legacy, and you basically shared everything I could have possibly wanted to ask you, I think, within the last 20 minutes or so.
yeah,
But I think about legacy a lot in terms of, I think just more directly my dad,
yeah,
who, and my dad's a funeral director, so obviously he's in the business where you have to think about that stuff, especially,
yeah, for real.
but I think, but my dad's a Pan-Africanist, so just the
Mhm.
idea of like your life, especially as a Black person, is not your own. Your life should be connected to how we're able to get our people to one step closer to the freedom that is owed to us.
Yes,
So everything that you do, the way that you move should be directly connected to, as you said, in terms of your daughters, like making their lives a little bit better um, than yours. And so I feel like within our community, I think when we talk about legacy, I think we often talk about money and property, and
yes,
all like the superficial, which to be fair, I think there's definitely something to all of that stuff. There's
agreed.
nothing wrong with that. And I think definitely with my dad, he kind of speaks, especially as far as, home and like all like the traditional stuff, which I think which I definitely understand, but I think also in that same vein, my dad does speak to the idea of, your feet as far as what are you progressing to? Like when you die, how do you want people to remember you? And I think definitely like you're on your way. I think definitely as far as this exhibit, while maybe temporary as far as the, just the time frame that it was there,
Yeah,
but you have it forever. And at least it will be immortalized as long as there's internet, you know, it will be
yeah,
seen.
yeah,
And it's something that your daughters are able to share,
yeah.
like when they're older and they have children and they could say, like, oh, grandpa
Grandpa did
was
this,
this
or my
type of
daddy
thing.
did this.
This.
When it's show and tell at school, they can
Right.
say, "Oh yeah, my daddy did this."
Right. Like, and I feel like we don't often have those conversations at all in, I think, within our community, quite I think as regularly and I think with the urgency as we probably should. I think in
Yes,
a lot of ways, and this, that's why I don't think I told you this directly, but my channel in a lot of ways kind of came out from a promise that I made to one guy in Uganda in particular, and I hope to have him on the show at some point.
sure.
But he is running, at least at the time, a clinic um, outside of Entebbe,
Mm.
Uganda.
Tell me, Uganda. Yes.
So, and I've known of him for the past decade when I visited the children's ministry that I was connected with. We've kept in contact, not so much now, but but the last visit I went to Uganda, he wanted to show me his project essentially with this clinic and what he was trying to do. And basically it's like what you can imagine, like outskirts, like a village.
Mhm.
You can imagine it, and trying to basically offer these villagers childcare, healthcare, basically. You know, like we're talking about healthcare, and here's this guy with barely any funding to uplift his community just a little bit. But he was sharing, obviously, like the kind of things that he wants to do, obviously, are very limited in the country. So he needs a lot of external support. And like, and he shared with me, you know, like, would you be able to help me with this?
Sure.
And you know what? Like, a part of me, not a big part of me, was just very depressed
Mhm.
in a sense that at the time I couldn't, because I didn't have that kind of capital, you know,
Mhm.
to help him,
Yeah.
you know? And so, in a lot of ways, and it's not just him, but people, especially in Uganda and Rwanda like him, who I've heard their stories, and they're like, we need more people to know what we're doing. Can you please tell them about what we're doing?
Mhm.
So they're able to support, you know, however means that they need.
Sure.
And yeah, so I think in a lot of ways, indirectly, is why I started this channel.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, obviously, you know, going back, you know, many times, because information that we're talking about is not necessarily readily available over there. So the fact
Sure.
that now I could say, hey, watch this video, or if I clip it, watch this clip, you know, of
Mhm.
us talking about these things, and at least it helps them start thinking about, you know, in terms of, but also just kind of sharing, you know, like, hey, watch this clip of DJ, like, watch the exhibit and learn more about the stuff that I try to share with you
Mhm.
in terms of the reality of what it's like living Black in the West.
Yes.
So I think in a lot of ways, you know, like indirectly, you are kind of adding to the legacy that I'm trying to fulfill. And
I'm
I
proud of
think
that too.
generally, but I think these are conversations that I think we need to have more frequently, you know, within the community, because I think we kind of think in terms of day by day, and not necessarily, I think just due to racism, white supremacy, whatever you want to call it,
Of course.
that we don't think to the future as far as what do we want to leave our children with, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like if we were able to do that a little better, um then I think we'll be a lot farther along. And so for me, you know, now I'm 41, it's just the idea of now thinking in terms of what do I want people to say about me when I die? You know, because I think of like Colin Powell when he passed. Yeah, there were a lot of people who said a lot of nice stuff about him, but you had to kind of balance out with a lot of the crap that he did too.
A ton of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, I have to shout out Nick from Fred Hampton Lessons, who says, essentially, if you don't want people to talk bad of you in death, live your life with honor. And I think with us, it's like the idea of like, how can we live our lives in a way that people would be inspired to go be better than us? You know, like I always kind of feel, especially like given within our generations now, we're kind of inspiring each other to be the worst, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And not much progression, you know, as a community. And I
Mhm.
think thinking internationally, like,
Globally.
yeah, we're not we're so insular among each other that
Yep.
we're not aware of all of the stuff that we can be doing and how we can be, I think, of better support
And
to
growing.
each other.
Yeah, there is a. This is going to sound horrible the way I say it, but I know how I want it to sound. Within the Black diaspora, there's definitely a certain amount of ethnocentrism that takes place.
Yeah.
Where, and again, I know I can say this to you and you would understand immediately what I'm talking about. When you came to this country, you were a Black person, a Black child that spoke with a British accent. And then the immediate conversations you probably had around other Black people is, oh, why do you talk like that? Why do
Yep.
you sound like that?
Yeah.
You sound like a white person.
Yeah.
But then white people will look at you and say, well, wait a minute, you don't sound like all the other Black people that I'm
We
in
know, which
contact
is
with.
more or less, I don't want to say, well, I want to say it like hood rat, basically. Like, you don't look like them, you don't sound like them. Like, and we shared before, like on your
Yeah.
channel back over the summer,
Yep.
you know, like I didn't know where I fit even through into my adulthood. You know, it's just kind of like I am too white, quote unquote, for the Black people, but I'm too, you know, the white people would accepted me just given my skin color anyway.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it was like I didn't know where I fit. I
And
didn't
that's that
find
ethnocentrism that I'm talking about.
right.
Instead
So
of acceptance, but simply on the basis of not only the color of your skin, but as Martin Luther King said during the I Have a Dream speech, but the content of your character, people immediately look at you, use cultural biases and identity politics to categorize you. And
right.
then that categorization or that box they put you in becomes not only a figurative box, but a literal box. You
Yeah.
get put into this box where you're not thinking outside the box. You're
Right.
unable to see something else other than the four walls that are around you.
Right. Yeah,
And
basically I was considered other among my own.
isn't that something? That's
Yeah.
the ethnocentrism that I'm talking about within the Black
Yeah.
community. That's
Right.
exactly
I
it.
think it's more, I think honestly, I think that's more Pacific in this country in particular.
I thoroughly agree with you.
I think
thoroughly agree
it's a
with you.
different beast in this country because
Hell, it's not even a different beast. It's the beast.
right.
Because it doesn't exist. I don't
Right.
think it exists in other
I
countries.
don't think, and not to say it doesn't exist, but it exists. If it does, if it exists in a different way. But I think even
But I don't know
like
what that way
I
would
can
be.
go, I can go to the Caribbean and kind of fit in. I can go
So
to
could I.
Africa now, and other than the fact when I open my mouth, that people will, oh, he's not from here. But like every time I go back home to Uganda, like I can basically just fit
Be
right in.
yourself. Yep.
Just actually, in a lot of ways, I feel the most free
Mm.
because, you know, like people are not necessarily thinking of me in terms of like where I'm placed because it's so tribal and like, so there's just more of an acceptance in a lot of
Sure.
ways of, you know, like if you come from a different tribe, you're going to do things differently. Whereas here, it's like everything is kind of more compartmentalized as Black is associated with a few examples. And so for me to kind of come in and kind of rock the boat, and to be fair, you know, like this was when I was young, you know, so I didn't know any better and neither did they. But then like, and I think I shared this, the idea of like, I felt like I had to adapt to them versus them adapting to me.
Mm.
So that, and I don't think I realized the implications of that until I was much older.
Of course.
But how like I had to give a lot of myself away, like one part of it, my accent, to make them feel comfortable.
Mm.
Versus what did they have to give up, you know? So Yeah, but I think here it's a different beast here, which and again, I'm going to speak to my bias. I don't quite understand, but I think a lot of it has to do with how isolated I think I think generally if you are Black and you live outside of America, I think you're more well versed generally as far as what's happening, like around the world, at least outside of here. Whereas here, I feel like just due to the crosses that we bear in this country, it's a lot harder to kind of look beyond that and kind of see, oh, there are things that are better outside of here.
Yeah, or maybe not necessarily better, Colin, because better is subjective.
But I
It's
think
different.
a different perspective than
Different.
a perspective that if you didn't leave, you wouldn't necessarily know about,
Yep.
but
And
kind of see how other people live and do things. And some extent, it's how better it could be.
Yeah, and
You
that
know, and-
different that people don't necessarily see could change the entire momentum of your life.
Right.
And there's no, I don't know what the return on investment of that sort of wisdom and or insight would be, but it's important. It's important. And you talked about thinking about the future and not knowing any better, or maybe having an idea of what you want to talk about, or your legacy. Bob Marley said in the song Exodus, he said, "Open your eyes and look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? We know where we're going. We know where we're from.
Mhm.
We're leaving Babylon. We're going to the promised land."
Yeah.
Exodus, movement of Jah people, but in
Yeah.
this instance, the people.
Yeah.
And that sort of knowing where you're going and knowing where you're from, I think that's an issue in the Black community.
Yeah.
Because we don't necessarily know
No.
where we're going.
Yeah.
And because of colonialism, capitalism, etc., we don't necessarily know where we came from, which is why your channel is so important. It's so important because you're connecting you're connecting people from this culture and this country to parts of the world where they may not necessarily know where they're from, but they might be from there, and they can get to learn about themselves and where they came from in Africa, and then make connections between the African diaspora and life in these United States of America. And there will be more than likely some similarities that would suggest that life in other parts of the African diaspora
is
is not that much different than parts of being an African American.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir, and I think for me, having some connection to the Caribbean, obviously, and then here,
That
it's
too.
just like,
Yep.
if you break it down to the bread and butter issues and culture, there's really not much different. There really isn't that much difference at all, and I think ultimately, again, your shirt kind of says it. We all need those things.
All of them. That's why I've got it in multiple languages.
Right. So it's like, I think our common needs and desires essentially are the same. And yeah, I think for me, it's making connection, in a way that, having been tasked in a lot of ways, I wouldn't say responsibility, but I guess in a lot of ways I should say privilege, because I was able to leave the country and kind of discover a perspective that I wasn't necessarily hearing here,
Mhm.
or even in the UK, and then coming back and being like, what do I do with this information? What do I do with this call for people to connect them, in terms of, and then like it took me a few years, but then like, essentially became the birth, of this channel.
Yep.
And so I think for me, yeah, I definitely think in terms of legacy in a lot of ways is kind of thinking outside the box a little bit and not doing what everyone else is doing. Like and I think for me it's the idea of like growing up, I was so concerned about fitting in, not necessarily standing out, being in the background and letting other people, kind of take the glory of whatever is happening, like being comfortable in that. And I think I'm still kind of that way, but I think I definitely have realized over the years that you can only do that for so long before you're called to step up to the plate, as you said earlier. And I think, with the fact that people have asked me and shared with me that this is a desire and they don't necessarily have the things that I have access to, that I have to do this. And, um, but yeah, I think just the idea of us thinking in terms of, moving forward as you're basically are preparing yourself to be an ancestor, as my father would say, so like what do you want people to remember you for, and I want to be known for someone who, I think, among other things, but I think most importantly, that did something to have better connections with among our own in a way that I didn't necessarily have
It's important.
when I was growing up.
It's important.
Like, but having that, all of us, whether you're from the Caribbean or from Europe or from Australia or from Africa, or from here, like, or from Latin America, wherever, as long as you have some type of Afrocentricism in you, that you're able to feel connection, no matter where you are in the world,
Where
and
you are.
feel like you're home. You don't feel like you're the oddball or like you're misplaced or like you don't fit in, but but anywhere you go, there's a home for you. And I've been very blessed to have that, like in many areas of the world. And I want people to, not necessarily if you're not able to necessarily travel, but at least in this space, that there can be that sense.
Yep. Makes perfect sense.
belonging.
Makes perfect sense.
So, I mean, as I said to you at the beginning, like before we went on, like we definitely need to continue this conversation, but we've been on, I knew it's going to be long, but been
Almost
on
3
for
hours.
3 hours,
Yep.
which
Almost
sounds
3
about
hours.
right for us.
Yeah, it really
But,
is.
And
And plus the jet lag is starting to kick in.
right, I could see it.
Oh my God. Oof.
So very quick, within the next couple of minutes,
Yes, sir.
where can people find you? What are you up to? And yeah, just share your information, and and you're traveling, so if you want to let people know where you're going to be within the next few weeks, so that people can look for you, and yeah, kind of share
Awesome.
where you're up to and where you're going to be.
Awesome. Well, first of all, Colin, thank you again for having me on your platform. Always a joy to spend some time with you and chop it up as we famously have done in the past and will continue to do. You're seeing my handle right now at Joe Nice DJ. That's everything. At Joe Nice DJ on Instagram, Facebook, SoundCloud, Twitter, Mixcloud, and Facebook. So all the same, Joe Nice DJ. This coming Friday, which is Black Friday, I'm playing a warehouse party in Los Angeles. It's the Smog Sessions 15-year anniversary party. It's going to be immense. I promise you that. I just type in Smog Sessions 15-year anniversary party on the internet. You'll find it. Tickets are available. Come out. It's a warehouse party, 2 rooms. It's going to be amazing. I promise you that's going to be amazing. A couple of weeks after that, I'm in, I think December 10th is Athens, Georgia. So I'll be down in Athens, Georgia. I'll be there. Next night is December 11. I will be in Johnson City, Tennessee. We're working on the flyers and getting everything organized for that. There's a couple of other things I have going on later this year. I can't remember off the top of my head. January of next year is going to be busy. There's already some things on the books for early January and it going into February. Yeah, we'll see how far I can go and how many places I can go and how many new countries I can visit. You know, I want to get some more pins in this map. So we're going to try to keep that matriculating and going. And by the way, you notice I'm right by Africa, and I need to do something with actually dragging this map down about 8 to 10 inches. That way there's more of the map and less of the wall, because I want people to see a bit more Africa here, because there's only one pin in it and it's in Tunisia and it's way up there. And that red pin, it's just over here. But I need more of down here.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'll do some more of that in 2022. Hopefully I'll get to a bit more of this area over here.
Middle East.
In Asia, the Middle East. I've done a bunch of Asia already, and I'd like to maybe see a bit more of the Caribbean before I'm just like, I've kind of done everything I wanted to do with music. But yeah, 50 countries is it's not bad. It's not bad. And there's probably still another 15 to 20 countries that I still would like to visit. And it's interesting. You said something earlier on about you feel like you're the most home in Africa, in Uganda.
I wouldn't say the most home. It's one of many.
One of many.
It's one of many. But I think, like, as far as for me, the most free, I think the Caribbean might be the closest of a place, but I don't go there as often and had that significant time there to really, but that would be the second closest. But I think as far as going there and not have race be an issue, as far as being able to move around and like not have to worry about, like being the only Black person in the room, or like the idea of like, just in that sense of the chains that have kind of enslaved us in this country, in this side of the world, as a Black person, you don't have over there. So it's just really, I feel full there. Like, I feel like I don't have to worry about all that other stuff. So it's like, I can talk more openly about these issues and not have to kind of think about, like I have to worry about the context of how it be said and like whatever else. But I think the other thing is that people are generally asking these questions. So it's kind of like, okay, I could share what I know, but also know that I'm speaking to you as, more on a multicultural stance. Like, I can't necessarily speak in terms of an African American stance all the time, if ever.
True.
So you're just getting one perspective.
Right. One of many.
I think, which even that is unique.
Right.
Like, you need to hear from others, who are not like me, to give you more of that perspective too.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. Well said.
But anyway,
yes, sir.
I
desperately need to sleep. Oh my God. The jet lag is really starting to affect me.
So that being said, we're at 3 hours now. So I'll definitely let you go. But it just means we'll have to schedule to come on another time, and
you let me know, and I'm available.
Yeah,
let me know, I'll make it happen.
So those of you who are still here, thank you so much for riding a vest. And again, this I will send I'll probably put clips over the next few days, and then obviously, as far as his exhibit, I'll also link that as well
Yep.
as John Farina's
Video.
as well. I'll also
Yep.
link that.
Mhm.
Have a great night or
Yes, sir.
morning wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
You are Mukwano, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right.
Take care.
Peace.